That night, the imperial palace was as lively as ever. Ladies and gentlemen of high society were talking animatedly and laughing merrily. Many couples were dancing in the large hall, and only one girl carefully hid behind a column, occasionally looking out to assess the situation. Rich Cassio, what is he doing here? She wondered, watching one man. The young man seemed to be waiting for someone, but when he didn't wait, he sighed tiredly and headed for the exit. The girl sighed with relief. He had finally left. So long ago that only a vague memory remains, she died in an accident and was reborn as a villain in a romantic fantasy. The novel's main man is known for his coldness and unapproachability, but after a period of denying his feelings for the main character, he eventually falls in love. However, the villain, Luciana, suffering from unrequited love for him, mocks the main character in a bunch of stupid ways. As luck would have it, the hero finds out about her dirty tricks. Because of this, the reputation of her parents and family is tarnished. The entire estate became a laughingstock for high society. The hero completely ignores the villain, and he and the heroine live happily ever after. It would seem that the character has met a miserable end, but in the finale she will also run away. No, better to refuse. She has already decided everything for herself. She will live as she should, comfortably and in abundance. After all, he probably knows that the central characters are destined to be together. Then, is there any point in sticking to the original story? She is only a villain if she follows the original. You just need to do everything in spite of it, not collide or get involved with the main character. Luciana refuses to play the role of a villain with a sad ending. She will live to the end as a magnificent extra, so she decided, making sure that Rich left. Perhaps it's because it's her first time at an imperial ball, but she's completely overwhelmed by the scale. As she moved cautiously through the ballroom, the girl noticed something. There was a full glass on the table, garnished with a slice of lemon. Once the coming-of-age ceremony has taken place, she can drink at banquets. She doesn't yet know her norm in this body, but she'll figure it out later. Well, well, Duke Cassio, came a cry of admiration, and a flock of girls approached the man with undisguised joy. What a surprise! I didn't think I'd meet you here, said one of the girls. And while the young ladies were showering the Duke with compliments, a suspicious waiter for some reason approached the table, and, taking a small bottle from his bosom, he poured the liquid from it into the Duke's glass. Having done his job, the waiter quietly left. I wonder if you have found a partner for today, the same lady asked the Duke, intending to offer her candidacy. But the man said sharply that he was not interested. And then, taking his glass from the table and announcing that he had business to attend to, he headed towards the exit of the hall. His rudeness did not upset the girls at all. Blushing, they noted that the rumors were not lying. He was like an impregnable fortress. Finding himself on the terrace and taking a sip from his glass, Rich stated with relief that he had finally managed to escape. A slight warmth spread through the body, but there was also something unusual. The taste of the alcoholic drink was a little strange. Not like usual. While Rich was thinking about this, somewhere off to the side he heard a cheerful female laugh. The young lady with pink hair was happily clutching half a dozen glasses to her and laughing. Oh, if I had known that I could be so happy, I would have had more reasons to look forward to coming of age, she sang. Suddenly the girl staggered, lost her balance, and screamed in fear. Trying to regain her composure, she began waving her arms vigorously. There was a sound of breaking glasses, and the girl collapsed right in front of the frightened man. She sat on the floor for a few moments, realizing what had happened, and then quietly said, "Legs. I can't feel my legs. What should I do?" The lady's tongue was slurred. Her thoughts were confused. "Duke? Oh, maybe I'm a mermaid. Just think, I was hiding such a secret," she suddenly blurted out, and then asked the gentleman next to her to help her return to the sea, which made Rich completely convinced that she was out of her mind. Deciding that he would quickly help her and leave, he extended his hand and asked if she could stand up. Luciana struggled to lift her head to look at the face of the man who had said the fall looked painful. The world around seemed to shine and blur at the same time, but the girl still offered him her hand. Who is this man? She wondered, blushing deeply and feeling like her heart was about to burst out of her chest. He seemed familiar to her. Morning came suddenly in the huge mansion. Luciana felt pain all over her body and didn't understand why. Moving her limbs slightly, she suddenly found a naked man's chest under her hand. Could it really be a man in bed? The girl was taken aback and noticed that he was naked. The man hugged her in her sleep and suddenly opened his eyes. Luciana swallowed nervously. Because she immediately recognized him, it was Rich Cassio. A two-voice, heart-rending scream echoed through the huge house. And then Luciana squealed, suddenly feeling herself fly and ending up on the floor next to the bed. "Hey, throwing me around like that is a bit much," the girl said indignantly. But the man had no intention of apologizing. Moreover, he was starting to get angry. "Speak! Admit what you did to my body, pumped me full of aphrodisiacs," he demanded, blushing and covering himself with the blanket. And if she does not want to go for questioning, then she must obediently answer questions, and then she will be held accountable depending on her testimony. Luciana was dumbfounded. Why should she be punished, and how could she understand that she had drugged him? She considered herself the only one who felt like crying now, spending her first night like this, and not with just anyone, but with Richard. "Isn't this an accident that no one is to blame, for I also have no idea how it all happened, and I am just as confused as you," she said hesitantly. And she suggested that we pretend as if the previous night had not happened, and go our separate ways like ships at sea. "Impossible," Richard answered, grabbing the girl by the hand. "You can't pretend like nothing happened." The man approached her and grabbed her hand quite roughly. He lifted her hand, pointing to the design on her wrist. After all, the events of last night led to the fact that they are now connected. Luciana had absolutely no idea what he was talking about and just blinked her eyes in bewilderment. And she was horrified when Richard explained that the mark on her wrist was proof of their connection. The girl looked at her hand in confusion. Indeed, there was a mark, and in the same place as his. Does this mean that she is somehow connected to Richard? But she answered out loud that it was impossible. He was just joking. Is it possible to get it just because of one drunken mistake? It's possible. The only condition for establishing a connection is sexual intercourse, the Duke said, blushing. Luciana also blushed and thought about his words. If everything happened as he said, then ordinary people don't put marks. But if she's human, then what the hell is Richard? The man realized that she was thinking about his essence. "I'm different from the rest," he said, turning away. For centuries, the blood of wolves has flowed in the Cassio family, from the union of a werewolf and a human woman, a line born of love. These are the origins of the Cassio family. Luciana screamed in surprise. This was not the case in the original. Understanding her cry in his own way, the man explained that the blood of that wolf had been passed down in the family through generations, and left a mark on her partner for life. And he will love his chosen one until the end of his life. The girl shuddered at these words. "Now do you understand the situation we find ourselves in?" Richard asked the girl. Luciana understood and sincerely wanted to change this situation. But the man roughly grabbed her face, not letting her say anything. "It's enough if you thoughtlessly reveal to others what you learned today," he began in a threatening voice. Then he moved his face close to her lips. "You and your family will be in danger," Richard finished Cassio, almost touching her lips. Sharply pushing him away from her, the girl replied that she understood everything and vowed that she would not allow anything like that to happen. Richard suggested meeting again at the New Year's ball and talking. Returning home in the provided carriage, the girl sighed wearily. Where did the wolves come from here anyway? She had read the novel many times and there was nothing like that there. Come to think of it, not long before her death, the author said he was preparing an epilogue with a surprise. Could this be an unpublished story? Richard must have belonged to a different species. If so, then the romantic lines about his soul already belonging to her were a hint of a secret. But wait a minute, Richard told Deborah something about love until death and the intertwining of souls. So now these words are addressed to her. Luciana came in horror. But she doesn't want to separate the main characters, which is the point of changing the original story. Before Richard and Deborah's hearts were united, she became a villain who seduced him and bound him to her through her body. Where did she go wrong? The girl wondered. Weren't the main characters together the whole time on the day of the ball? Soon the carriage arrived at Leslie's estate, and a worried cry was heard towards the girl. Luciana recognized her brother's voice without a doubt. "You didn't come home last night and you just came here now?" asked Lauren Leslie, Luciana's older brother. The girl thought hard about how to answer, but could only say that fate had decreed it that way. So you just decided to have some fun. You're probably tired. Come into the house," the young man responded calmly. No matter how open the topic of sex is here, it is difficult for her to get used to it and take it lightly. Meanwhile, Lauren noticed the carriage in which his sister arrived, a four-wheeled carriage made of top-quality gilded wood, not quite up to Lucy's standard, but still a high-quality product. But why isn't there a family crest on it, whose degenerate dared to touch his beloved little sister? And although Lauren tried to keep a straight face, his anger at the stranger still broke through, but he immediately smiled kindly when the girl called him. "Are you worried about your mother and father?" Luciana asked, and indeed it was so. Her father was worried about his daughter. The girl hurried to greet her parents, and Lauren was touched by his little sister's kind heart. Meanwhile, Duke Cassio was reflecting on what had happened that night. His gaze, wandering around the room, suddenly came across an incomprehensible object. He reached out and picked up something that looked like a badge. Could it have been the daughter of the Leslie family who left this? She was the only stranger in the bedroom. But Rich still couldn't comprehend today's events drunk. He brought the woman into the bedroom. There is definitely someone else behind this. He doesn't know who, but this rat will definitely answer for everything. There was a knock at the door. It was Godwin, the Duke's servant. "I escorted the guest to the estate with the utmost care," the servant said respectfully. And yet he ventured to ask whether his lordship had really left a mark on Miss Leslie. The old servant, who knew about his master's secret, was horrified. And then Rich himself shuddered when he heard from Godwin that it was winter now. "You didn't tell her that every winter there is a mating season?" The question hung in the air. Duke Cassio understood Godwin's concerns, but he assured him that everything was fine because they would meet at the ball. This evening in the Imperial Palace was no less lively than the previous one. Young people were having fun and talking in the ballroom. Luciana was on the terrace, realizing that she felt much better in quiet places. There was such a commotion at home a few hours ago when she told her parents that she was going to the ball again. Thanks to her mother, who neutralized her brother and father, she managed to escape, but she is no longer a child. "So Miss Leslie is here," a male voice interrupted her thoughts. Duke Cassio was heading straight towards her. The man took a box from his bosom and handed it to the girl. There was a bracelet with a red stone in the box, and Luciana immediately realized that it was a magical item. "Try activating it with mana," Rich suggested to her, and Lucy did just that, concentrating and filling the bracelet with mana. "The day will soon come when the stone will shine. It will be a signal calling you," without looking at the girl, the Duke said. And, completely embarrassed and blushing, he added that this would be the beginning of the mating season. It took Luciana a while to grasp the meaning of his words, but when she did, her memory helpfully brought up a picture from the Animal World channel. "When I give the signal, using the mana stone you will get to my bedroom. Just do the same as now. The magic will activate itself," said Rich. But the girl interrupted him. "How is it in the bedroom? Does this mean that she should do something?" Luciana froze in her tracks, searching for the right words, and finally blurted out, "Sleep with you." The Duke immediately confirmed that, just like last time, they should spend the night together. "There's no way to break the bond?" Luciana asked hopefully, but the man replied that only if one of them died. Although terrified by the prospect, the girl still did not give up and asked what about the research on the marks, to which the answer was that they had all failed. "Is there really no other way out?" "No, it is still possible to get stuck into studying the marks." "Can you take on the research yourself?" she asked insistently. And the Duke wondered if she would really do it. "I graduated from the academy with a degree in magical crafts. Will you show me the relevant journals?" Luciana asked modestly. But the Duke began to say that this was one of the family's most important secrets. But the girl looked at him so pleadingly that he began to doubt. "If this proves useful, then so be it. I have a building in Rodwell. We can exchange findings there." Rich gave in. However, the girl was worried that if the mating season began before everything was successful. "Suppose I don't come when called, what will happen?" she asked. The Duke replied that he would endure it for a day or two, no longer, and then would most likely lose control and burst into her bedroom. "Willpower won't help here. He will probably be rude, so assistance is welcome." Luciana blushed and replied that she understood everything, but the girl's head was racing with the thought, could he really turn into a beast? The next day, an assistant came to the Duke with a report as ordered. He was searching for the person who left the badge in the Duke's bedroom. But even after bringing in the best intelligence guilds, they found nothing significant. The Duke asked if there really were no leads at all, and the assistant admitted this with regret. It seemed the culprits had gone deep into hiding. This whole memory loss and imprinting thing, someone is definitely pulling the strings. But which of the nobles at that ball could have arranged such a thing? For now, Rich can only exclude one family. At the ball yesterday, Miss Leslie assured him that she had never seen such an object. She hated snakes and could not have picked up such a thing in the Imperial Palace. Besides, she was drunk the whole time. Remembering their conversation yesterday, the man smiled tenderly. And the next moment it was as if lightning struck him. He had just been smiling, thinking about her. Luciana, anyway. He began and stopped, realizing that he was seeing a girl in front of him. Realizing that this could not be, the man tried to shake off the obsession. He looked at Logan again and realized he had only thought of her because the assistant was wearing yellow and pink. Feeling out of place, he quietly told Logan about the jacket. "You can take it off," Rich repeated, since the assistant did not understand at all what the Duke wanted from him. "Haha, of course it's still hot," he laughed tensely, pulling off his clothes, regretting in his soul that he had tried so hard to dress up. "And the shirt too," Duke Cassio added discontentedly. The last words scared Logan. If he took off his shirt, he would be left almost naked. Why was the Duke ordering him to undress? He would never agree. Could the Duke possibly have dirty thoughts towards him? Logan blushed and timidly asked why the shirt. "What are you even thinking about?" Rich got angry when he saw his look. And then he loudly ordered the servants to get rid of everything yellow and pink. Logan was once again afraid of what would happen to him, but the imperturbable servants were already dragging him towards the exit. While the servants carried away the source of the Duke's irritation, the latter tried to put his thoughts in order. But still, all his thoughts revolved around the girl with pink hair. He himself understood that he was full of thoughts about the young miss. The influence of the mark was so great that it was frightening. One could only hope that this woman's efforts would turn out to be successful. At this time, Luciana was thinking that the day had come when she promised to receive the research journal from Reached. And how could she unobtrusively ask Marie for a favor? After some thought, she came up with a plan of action. Step 1 was to call Marie, which was done quite easily. Step 2, quickly deliver the message. Luciana handed the maid a handkerchief and a note with an address, with instructions to go to the specified address, then say the name Lyrian and hand over the handkerchief. Step 3, give thanks and happily prepare to receive the information. But just as Luciana was about to leave, Marie stopped her by asking if it was really Rodwell. This is neither a residence nor a shopping district, such a strange place, and the lady even uses a pseudonym. For Luciana, this was an expected reaction, but still not desired. She knew it would be suspicious, but she still decided that impudence was her second happiness. "I'm preparing for a study, and they sell magical herbs there that are hard to find on the market." The girl kept a confident face, while inside she was shaking with fear. Marie thought for a moment and looked at her mistress with suspicion. "Wow, it must be a very secret corner," the maid was delighted. And she asked to provide this to her, while Luciana struggled with pangs of conscience and mentally apologizing for lying. Time passed, and now Marie was supposed to return. Finally, the satisfied voice of the maid was heard. Lucy rushed towards it because the box was quite heavy. Marie put the parcel on the table and hesitated slightly. She felt awkward talking about it. "Madam, that shop looks suspicious," she said to Miss Leslie in a low voice. Luciana didn't understand what she was talking about, and then Marie began to tell. When she arrived and opened the door, it was so dark that she screamed. But the girl still asked if there was anyone like that, when someone's rough voice ordered her to say her name, and someone put a sword to her neck. 2 angry eyes looked at the frightened girl. Then she held out her handkerchief with shaking hands, saying that she was there on behalf of Miss Lyrian. "So you are the promised buyer," said the frightening man. Then he thrust the box into her hands, and, having informed her that everything inside was listed, he showed her the door. "They threw me out like some kind of sneak." Marie was indignant, and Luciana sincerely pitied her, ordering her to rest today. The girl was worried about who would serve the mistress, but she was still grateful for the care. Luciana silently accepted the maid's thanks, and did not say that she simply had a mountain of documents waiting for her to study. Marie continued to sing the praises of her caring mistress as she tried to carefully escort the maid out of her room. Meanwhile, Rich Cassio was trying to solve one of the problems of who had access to his glass at the ball. This icon is also too suspicious if even the Informants Guild throws up its hands. Things are bad. As a commander, he must give the order personally. The Knights of Quarant are an elite order, second only to the Imperial Knights. Highly skilled warriors have gathered here. They must fulfill this mission with dignity. At this time, the Knights of Quarant were in full swing discussing what they saw as a pink-haired girl leaving the estate, although some did not believe that their iron-willed captain brought a woman into the house. And the pink hair clearly indicated that the girl was from the Leslie family, in which, by the way, the young Marquis Leslie simply adores his younger sister. The knights were very happy. Finally, someone appeared who would melt the icy heart of their captain. However, one of the knights noticed that this girl's hair was pink, not blonde, because earlier they thought that the Duke had gotten involved with the Count's nimble daughter. Their relationship was promising, but if you think about it, they weren't even dating, yet she was the only girl the captain talked to. At that moment, another knight named Rick passed by, and the chatterboxes asked why he went to Rodwell. "Why should I tell you?" Rick replied calmly. And he passed by, causing the knights to look at him with displeasure at his tediousness. "Then perhaps the person involved in the mission is Miss Leslie, the Marquis's daughter," one of the knights persisted, demanding an answer. Rick remained silent, not wanting to respond to the provocation, but he himself began to think. He was clearly told that her name was Lyrian, and the face of that servant appeared before his eyes. "This has nothing to do with the Leslie Marquisate. Everything is classified. Don't meddle where you're not wanted." Rick tore the annoying man away from himself. And yet, something doesn't add up. One of the knights definitely saw pink hair. However, it doesn't matter whether it's blonde or pink hair. Perhaps the duchy will soon have a mistress, the same knight said, not noticing the man behind him. And only when the Duke said that they seemed to want to die, what kind of nonsense about the mistress, did they turn around in fear. Shouting out that they were sorry, all the knights immediately took off their shirts and rushed to work off their punishment. Rixt himself wearily closed his eyes, because the words of these idiots made him again begin to imagine Luciana, who was now joyfully exclaiming that she was the mistress of this duchy. He was distracted from his thoughts by an excited knight hurrying towards him. The deputy captain of the knights, Caranta, apologized for being late and asked the Duke what had happened. "I found an unknown object in the bedroom. I need 3 people to explore the area," Richt ordered. He added that they needed to act discreetly and begin as quickly as possible. The deputy captain accepted the order. Luciana spent the entire evening of that day studying the documents after reading everything. She was convinced that the explanation for this phenomenon was the same as Richt had said. The connection with the original heroine, Deborah, was like a love child. And in her case, it was a catastrophic accident. Luciana was so absorbed in the twists and turns of the plot that she completely failed to see the text in front of her. Enough. She's trying to find answers on how to fix everything. There's no point in wasting her energy on empty thoughts. She needs to concentrate. Having decided to return to reading the documents, the girl pulled out the sheets of paper that were lying separately. But as soon as I read the first sentence, I froze in place. These were precautionary measures for the mating season that would help avoid complications. Swallowing nervously, Luciana began to read. If a situation arose where sexual intercourse could not be avoided, then she would need to, at a minimum, prepare. First, get the magic tool she received earlier. Then pour your mana into it and recite the spell written below. When the stone begins to shine, after registering the house as the place of return, complete the magic of registering the coordinates. But this is no ordinary artifact, the girl decided, examining the bracelet. It's worth at least 1 mansion in the capital. It's strange to give away such an expensive thing so easily. Suddenly, obscene fantasies about a wolfman flashed through her mind, and in shock from her own thoughts, the girl could hardly complete the thought that this, of course, was important. Now she will use the artifact to quickly come and go from the Duke's house. Meanwhile, Duke Cassio was taking a bath at his estate. The periods when he thinks about the lady become shorter and shorter. But then Richt's gaze caught on a yellow-pink shampoo can, behind which a little lady seemed to be hiding. Just think, there are still things that make him think of the ladies. It looks like mating season is just around the corner. By the way, today is the day Rick is leaving for Rodwell. I wonder if that woman brought anything significant. Meanwhile, Luciana was preparing Marie for the same task. "Can you take this to Rodwell?" she asked the maid, and the girl immediately answered in the affirmative. Luciana also handed the girl a small box. It was a thank you from her personally, small earrings with emeralds. Marie's green eyes shone even brighter at the sight of such beauty. Lady Leslie noted with a smile that the gift was not only for the purpose of the errand. This is also a sign that she is counting on Marie this year as well. "Mistress, mistress," the maid couldn't even find words, she was so grateful. "I'm glad you liked it. Well, I'm counting on you," Lucy said. And it was time for her to go and see off her brother, who was sadder than anyone else about leaving his sister. "Ah, today is the day when young Mr. Lorraine is leaving. It must be very sad that we won't be able to see each other for a whole year," Marie said thoughtfully. And then she added that she meant that the young master must be very upset, judging by what he had been doing up until now, literally idolizing his sister. In any case, the maid wished the lady to see the young master off well and to return, and not to worry about the task she had given her. Soon Duke Cassio received the box given to him by Lady Leslie. The man was very interested in what she wrote to him in the attached letter. "Hello, Duke. This is Luciana Leslie. Real winter has begun, and the days have become quite cold. I hope you are well," Richard read, and his imagination helpfully drew him a girl in a winter cape. The man smiled, delighted by this sight. Stop. Just think. Even in response to a polite greeting, he sits and smiles like a fool with joy. Trying to concentrate, he continued reading, but little Lady Leslie followed him everywhere. She asked him to prepare materials according to the table and asked if he by any chance had any family archives. Then there was a short list that he had to check. Having read everything, Richard came to the conclusion that these were, at least, not empty words. The logic was well-founded and the evidence convincing. And only then did he notice a small postscript. The lady asked to make sure that the maid carrying out the errand would not be frightened. She would be grateful if they were more careful with her. What happened? Judging by what she writes, the maid was very scared. Perhaps Rick was pestering her. But he is a good knight who understands perfectly well when he is being reprimanded. In the letter, Rich wrote that he would tell them to be more careful and also admitted his guilt in not keeping an eye on this, so he apologizes on his behalf. Richt also wrote that he ordered the preparation of materials of the highest quality, so there is no need to worry about this. But there was something else he had to say. It seems that some of the knights of his family began to suspect their relationship. It seemed they saw the lady leaving the estate. Richt promised to warn them on his part, but she should also be more careful. A few days later, Marie anxiously asked the lady if she was going to stay up late doing research that night as well. But Luciana did not answer the maid's question. Starting to get nervous, Marie began to pound hard on the door, asking the lady to open the door. Luciana suddenly opened her eyes, awakened by the noise, and she herself did not notice how she fell asleep. "Mary, you're the one who's been late. Hurry up or rest. When you leave, I'll go too," Lady Leslie answered, and the maid let out a relaxed breath. "The gentlemen are alive," asking her not to overwork herself. The girl left, and Luciana stretched, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. "Now is not the time for this. There are still things to do." "There are still things to do," the girl repeated to herself, but with each word her eyes closed more and more. Eventually, Luciana fell fast asleep. She woke up as unexpectedly as she had fallen asleep and was surprised to find herself lying on a bed. But who moved her here? As soon as she thought about it, the canopy curtains parted and a half-naked Rich approached the bed. Luciana's body didn't move. Had the mating season already begun? She felt as if she was not herself, and her legs did not obey her at all, while the Duke was approaching her. Approaching the bed, the man did not stop, but almost lay down on top of the girl, enveloping her in his arms. Why is she doomed to this? Luciana didn't want this. "Go away." She miraculously managed to stretch out her hand to push him away, and woke up to find herself still sitting at her desk, surrounded by documents, trying to push away the air. The girl sighed with relief. It was just a dream. An unexpected slight tingling sensation on her wrist made her flinch. Looking at her hand, she realized that the pattern was tingling. Had it really begun? A heavy premonition made her look away. Luciana looked at the bracelet. It was glowing brightly. The mating season had definitely started. But if she goes now, what awaits her there? Her imagination helpfully brought up a picture of Risht approaching her naked. He leans towards her, kisses her, and the girl screams in horror. She can't spend the night with a man who has lost control. The mere thought of it is depressing. The discomfort on my wrist intensified, and the magic around the design was pulsating with ever-increasing intensity. It seemed that the mark was hurting even more than before because of the rush. Rich Cassio was already in bed and even fell asleep, but his sleep was restless. The man groaned and tossed and turned. At some point, he sat up abruptly in bed, feeling like he was about to be torn to pieces, and his strength to hold it back was becoming less and less. There was such agony in his chest, as if it was tearing him apart, as if his heart was about to explode, but he still didn't want to call her. Rich bent over. It hurt so much that he felt like he was about to die. "Luciana, I need you," he called to the girl mentally, reaching out with a trembling hand to the bracelet. It had been a long time since he had called her, and the man had a hard time realizing that she never came to him. Was she really ignoring the signal? It was as if darkness had rolled over Richt. His consciousness was becoming increasingly cloudy. He was hot, his face was flushed, and he could not open his eyes. Like a light, cool vision, Richt felt gentle hands on his eyes. It seemed as if a gentle girl with pink hair was standing behind him, smiling, covering his eyes with her hands. All he could think about was Luciana, but she wasn't here. Realizing that he couldn't think clearly because of her, the Duke tried to get out of bed, but he was immediately racked by a new attack of agony. "Luciana, where are you?" "Luciana," he asked quietly into the void, never having seen the magical glow in the middle of the room and the girl who appeared in it. But she immediately saw the cowering Duke. He looks really bad. Has he really been suffering so much all this time? She even felt a little sorry for him, and the girl called him. He immediately turned his exhausted face towards her. Seeing this, Luciana realized that he had gone through hell. She, of course, knew that his pain was worse, but still she had no idea how much. The girl opened her mouth to ask how she could help, but with one movement he took her into his arms. Luciana was afraid that he would attack her, but it was not so. He hugged her gently but strongly, and the girl melted. It was like being hugged by a loving, affectionate puppy. Richt hugged the girl with his eyes closed, his hands stroking her hair, and his nose buried in her neck. The next moment the man touched her neck with his lips, and the girl exhaled in surprise. Oh, wait, she tried to break free, but it wasn't so easy to do from the strong male arms. Her hands touched the man's exposed chest, pushing him away slightly. Luciana felt like her heart was about to burst out of her chest. Richt grabbed her hand, firmly but tenderly, and in a languid voice asked her not to push him away. Seeing his expression, the girl realized that this was the first time she had seen such a vulnerable side of the Duke. The man gently touched the fingers of her hand with his lips, moving higher and higher, leaving kisses on every centimeter of her skin. "Lucy," at some point he raised his burning eyes to her. Luciana was confused, only her family calls her that. "Why, can't I do the same?" the Duke asked with a smile. And he suggested calling her Luciana, capturing her face with both hands, and the girl realized that talking to him was useless. He was out of his mind. But she still had the magic item. Luciana clutched the bracelet to herself like her last hope. "This won't be needed now," the man said mysteriously, taking the bracelet. The girl tried to object and stop him, but Richt had already pressed his lips to hers, cutting off any objections. The bracelet fell to the floor with a quiet thud, useless to anyone. They kissed for a long time, and Luciana felt like she was floating away somewhere. Without breaking away from the girl, Richt gently stroked her back, moving lower and lower. Finally, the man's hand slid down her back, clutching her numerous skirts. Feeling his hand on her butt, Luciana was horrified. Trying to stop him, the girl pressed her hands against his chest. Only this movement forced Richt to finally tear himself away from the girl's lips, both of them breathing heavily. Duke Cassio took a moment to catch his breath, giving her a little respite. "Your lips are swollen," the man said in a hoarse voice. Luciana wiped her face in embarrassment. She felt that something had changed in him. But she couldn't think about it for long, because Richt started to act again. Now he had the girl in his arms. A mysterious smile played on the man's lips, and he looked straight into her eyes. "Let's go to bed," he said, heading towards the large bed. Luciana didn't even have time to object before she was instantly thrown onto the bed, and the Duke himself began to unbutton his shirt, without ceasing to look at the girl with shining eyes. Luciana looked at him with bated breath last time she was drunk, and didn't know it was so exciting. The man slowly unbuttoned and took off his shirt and walked towards her. Feeling like a cornered hamster, the girl frantically wondered if they would really do it. Suddenly a hand gently touched her cheek, and the girl blushed again. "Relax, Lucy," Richt said gently, and he pressed his lips to the girl's lips, captivating her. Then, pressing lightly, he forced her to fall onto the bed, taking a horizontal position, and after enjoying her lips, the Duke moved on to the tender and sensitive skin of her neck, and he began to move lower down her body, causing a sensitive moan to escape the girl's lips. She still tried to slow him down with her hand, but soon she felt how soft his hair was, and her movements became stroking. The man raised his head, enjoying her touches and understanding them as consent. Returning to the girl's lips, Richt became completely immersed in their sensitive game. The man and woman had the whole night ahead of them. Morning came suddenly. Luciana woke up with a mixture of cold and pain throughout her body. Opening her eyes, she discovered Richt's face very close by. It must be admitted that he is the main male character, and therefore very handsome. And yesterday he didn't act like a madman for a moment. The girl pulled herself together. Enough of remembering. The whole situation was already upsetting. She needed to somehow get out of bed, but because of the man lying next to her, she literally couldn't move. Rich Cassio suddenly opened his eyes. The man stared wide-eyed at the girl next to him. Barely remembering what was happening for a few moments, he realized where he was and what he was doing, while Luciana worried that their faces were too close to each other. And after just a couple of seconds, the man jerked his hands sharply, and the girl flew from the bed to the floor. It was like déjà vu. On their first night, she had flown out of bed in exactly the same way. "I'll bring a contraceptive drink. Drink it before you leave," Rich said coldly, getting out of bed and throwing on a robe. Luciana felt a little sad, but if you think about it, it was all true. Last night did not happen by their will. They were definitely out of their minds. The tenderness that was yesterday is not at all what Rich actually experiences. It's just a fake caused by the mating season. But frankly speaking, she has no reason to expect kindness. This is just an accident that they got involved in due to a misunderstanding, and so they are just strangers who spent the night together twice. Rich tried not to look at the girl, but he could feel her irritated state behind his back. "Shouldn't you leave now?" he asked as Luciana remained sitting on the bed. And blushing, he reminded her of her words about how he should behave more carefully so that no one would find out. Although Luciana understood their entire situation, she couldn't help but be taken aback by the fact that after everything he was so easily driving her away. In fact, she herself was not eager to stay, but his words hurt her pride. The girl sharply and demandingly extended her hand to him. Rich didn't understand what she was doing, so the girl told him to return the item and she would leave. "Give me back the magical item you took yesterday," the girl repeated. At the mention of last night, Rich turned as red as a tomato. After all, he himself took the magic bracelet from her, saying that she would no longer need it. And then he passionately kissed the unresisting girl. What the hell did he do yesterday? He thought indignantly, picking up the bracelet from the floor. Turning to Luciana, he informed her that everything she had seen and heard was nonsense. "I would like you to forget what happened," he added ingratiatingly. Handing over the artifact, Luciana abruptly took the bracelet away. She had already realized yesterday that it was abnormal. She would also like to forget his shameful past and sweet words. "Then I'll go," the girl said in a cold tone, getting out of bed. But as soon as she got out of bed, the man's eyes widened in surprise. Rich, quite by accident, noticed a small wound on Luciana's white skin. Memory immediately brought back a moment from last night when, in a fit of passion, he bit her. Without realizing what he was doing, Rich suddenly grabbed Luciana by the hand, not letting her leave. "Wait," he shouted, not knowing how to apologize, and immediately regretted his rash act. At the moment he felt sorry for her, but how to start a conversation? "It seems you have nothing more to say." Luciana pulled her hand out of his grip, and, clutching the bracelet to herself, she announced that it was time for her to go. Rich tried to say something, but in a matter of moments she imbued the artifact with mana and disappeared, leaving Duke Cassio standing in his bedroom in splendid isolation. Lady Leslie returned home overnight, and taking a bath, I thought about last night. In addition, she needed to apply a healing ointment. Her whole body ached. She even found traces of human teeth on her skin, but she was not very surprised by this. And memory helpfully threw up the moments when these traces appeared on her. Well, he is still a descendant of werewolves. She lowered her head halfway under the water and screamed. The water muffled the scream. She needed to at least have a drink, otherwise the memories were too vivid. She could only hope that with time everything would get better. Coming out of the bathroom, Luciana found Marie in the room, who had just brought breakfast. "Come and eat quickly before the food gets cold," the maid called, and the lady hurried along with delight. As she gobbled up one dish after another, the girl only admired the taste of the food. "Madam, you eat so well today," Marie remarked, and Luciana was dumbfounded. The maid was very worried that her mistress had been busy lately and had hardly eaten, but Luciana reassured her that she was simply especially hungry today. "Eat more, madam. You are already thin. You need to eat well," the maid said, helping the lady dry her hair. But when the girl's hand touched the mistress's forehead, Marie perked up. "Wait, it seems you have a slight fever, madam. You are ill." The worried maid jumped around Luciana, and she asked if she was cold at night, but the girl could not say that. On the contrary, it was too hot that night. "Oh, I'm probably overtired. It's okay." She tried to change the subject, but it wasn't so easy to get rid of Marie making a scary face. The girl concluded that the lady was not feeling well. And already on the verge of panic, she told the lady to lie down and that she would immediately call a doctor. Luciana had no choice but to obey unquestioningly. The doctor reported that the lady had a cold, and Luciana lay quietly in bed, listening to a barrage of grumbling from Marie, apparently physically exhausted. Her sleep patterns were already disrupted by the research, and the stress of mating season was also considerable. Now she had time to think about what was happening. Her parents have already noticed that she constantly disappears into the research laboratory and are very worried. If they stop her from doing research because they're worried about her, it will be problematic. But in general, it's all because of Risht. The girl was indignant. No matter what she thought, his behavior was the only reason for everything that was happening. Images came to mind of how tenderly he touched her at night and how tenderly he spoke to her, like a man in love. And in contrast to his behavior in the morning, genuine surprise and a push. After everything that happened, he pushed her away again. Luciana did not understand anything at all. If it continues like this, it would be better if he behaved as usual from the very beginning. Why even pretend to be kind? It's incredibly irritating. Then the girl thought about the meaning of everything that was happening. Imprinting makes your partner fall in love with you by force. The main character imprinted on her after spending the night. So what he showed during the mating season is just a fake caused by imprinting. Lucy understands this perfectly well, and Rich, too, is probably having a hard time coming to terms with the fact that he has suddenly become a different person. So she too should just pretend to step in poop and ignore him. But to be honest, she didn't feel uncomfortable. On the contrary, she felt a very small and insignificant click inside her heart. What other click? Luciana was indignant at her own thoughts. Now it seems to her that she was simply deceived. The fact is that she is the only one here beating the drums and bells, so she will definitely break the imprint by the end of this year. 3 days later, Duke Cassio looked thoughtfully out the window. No matter how much he thought about it, he shouldn't have kicked her out like that day. "That's right, maybe I should apologize to her right now," Rich's voice asked, and literally ordered him to go to her and admit his guilt. Duke Cassio looked around nervously to see who he was, and the voice replied that he was his true self. "You still worry about her? Apologize. Don't give in to her true nature, but your partner is probably offended." Many voices from all sides told him contradictory words, each demanding that he do as he says. Rich tried to shut them all up, but they didn't calm down, and most importantly, he was very hurt by the thought of what would happen if she hated him forever. No, this must not happen, because if she hates him, it will be the end of everything. The mere thought of it drives him crazy with pain. Rich really wanted to stop thinking about this girl, and if it came down to it, he needed to go somewhere where he wouldn't remember her. With this thought, the man headed for the exit. The carriage rocked rhythmically. Heading towards the city, the Duke intended to take care of financial matters. At some point, the wheels suddenly turned, carrying the passenger into the distance. Rich looked thoughtfully out the window at the houses and trees flashing past. "Duke, we have arrived," the coachman announced as the carriage reached a large estate. It was Leslie's mansion, but in the end, Rich Cassio came here anyway. He came, but what should he do now? And the open gates seemed to beckon him. Stepping forward, the man stopped. Noticing something a little ahead, near the fountain, stood a pink-haired girl. He immediately thought it was Luciana, and even imagined how surprised she would be to see him here. Rich rushed towards her with a completely happy look, calling her by name. "Aren't you Duke Cassio?" the girl asked, but it was definitely not Luciana. Damn, it wasn't Lady Leslie, it was Marchioness Leslie, Luciana's mother. Risht was painfully aware of his mistake, while the woman said in surprise that she had not expected to see him here. "Yes, it's been a while since we've seen each other," the Duke confirmed awkwardly, realizing that she found his presence here strange. The woman behaved with the utmost politeness, but deep down she wondered whether she and Duke Cassio were on such a relationship that they would exchange personal greetings. Until now, he had always avoided any communication except official, and the Marquise thought that he was one of those who were burdened by social receptions. She sincerely didn't understand what was going on, but his presence in their mansion was rather strange. However, maintaining an outward calm, the Marquise asked what brought him here. Richt hesitated, his brain working at full speed, searching for a plausible answer. The carriage broke down right here, and while I was waiting, I was looking at the beautiful garden." He blurted out the first thing that came to mind. The Marquise was ready to provide him with any assistance she could, but the Duke smiled tensely, feeling very uncomfortable, and replied that everything was fine. By that time, everything should almost be ready. Almost fixed, he asked his coachman loudly, puzzling him. The man's gaze wordlessly ordered the servant to answer quickly, and he, frightened and not understanding anything, answered, "Yes, almost ready." "He says it's almost fixed," Risht said to the Marquise with a smile, glad to have gotten out of this sticky situation. The woman thought about it, and it seemed to her that the Duke wanted to call Lucy, but she immediately dismissed this thought because this was the impenetrable Duke Cassio. "Then perhaps I'll go," Rich declined and hurried to the carriage. There was only one thought in his head: why did I even come here? "Is business finished for today?" the Duke asked his assistant. And having heard an affirmative answer, he wearily said that it was time to go home. The assistant asked the gentleman to wait while he ordered a new carriage to be brought. Rich remained waiting outside when he heard Lady Leslie's name mentioned in a casual conversation. "It was the first time Lady Leslie had invited me," one of the girls said, while the other asked in surprise what the occasion was. Rich's eyes widened and he became all ears. It was Luciana's birthday. The girls were excitedly discussing the upcoming banquet, but at some point they began to speak in whispers. And the petrified Rich realized that he could no longer hear anything from their conversation. Damn, why spread gossip everywhere? The man punched the nearest wall with all his might. The gossips were frightened by such an unexpected and rude act, and the assistant who came running was also shocked by the gentleman's behavior. "The wall cracked," he reported with horror, wondering why the Duke had behaved this way. A worried man in a red suit was also hurrying towards them. "Oh no, my sweet little one, whom I have so painstakingly acquired with the savings I have saved for 20 years. He burst into tears, looking at the cracked wall. And then he got angry and turned to the one who had done this to his precious wall. But then he stopped short, seeing his gaze and also taking in his clothes, judging by everything. He was an aristocrat. Then he looked down at his broken fist to see if he had really hit with his bare hand. It seemed he had contacted a crazy aristocrat. The shopkeeper stood humbly, waiting for an answer, just as the Duke's assistant waited for his reaction. "Oh, I'm sorry, it's our fault. So if you send us an invoice for the repairs, we'll pay for everything." The assistant put on a wide smile and handed the store owner a business card. And then he added in a whisper that he would like to keep the incident a secret, and the owner, having learned that it was Duke Cassio, was in awe. "I'm sorry, but as an apology, I will pay double the estimate and also fully compensate for lost profits during the repairs," Rich added. The man sincerely thanked His Excellency the Duke, in his soul already counting the pile of money he would receive from him. With that, they said goodbye. The assistant reminded them that they would be waiting for his letter, and the owner bowed low, saying goodbye to the aristocrat. "Your Excellency, why did you suddenly break down the wall?" "You seem strange today," asked the assistant as they headed towards the carriage. Risht, of course, didn't answer, so the young man, as if that was how it should be, continued chatting. "There are no urgent documents requiring your consideration today, so when we return, you had better have a good rest." He faltered at the last words as the Duke stopped near a shop window. Fearing that His Excellency was about to do something else, the assistant asked worriedly what had happened. But the Duke continued to stare at the display case, his expression blank, so the assistant turned around too. There in the display case, a huge pink diamond on a chain sparkled. With a wise look, the assistant reflected that this was clearly not for a woman. Perhaps the Duke had developed an interest in collecting jewelry, a very constructive hobby that would do him good. With this quality, it's definitely worth buying, and besides, this place is run by a master. The assistant praised the diamond. Rich asked with interest whether the master was famous, and the assistant replied that recently he had been enjoying great attention from noble ladies in high society. "They say that when you put on his jewelry, you feel like you've been born again." "The pink diamond matches the color of her hair," the Duke thought. The man looked at the shop window for a long time and thought. Then, abruptly, as if nothing had happened, he stated that the coachman was probably waiting. "You're just leaving?" the assistant asked, dumbfounded, to which the Duke replied that there was no point in trinkets. That same evening, a terrible thunderstorm broke out. "It's raining at a time like this. It's scary. You need to quickly close the door and go home." The jeweler approached the door of the store, but just as he was about to hang up the closed sign, a flash of lightning illuminated a shadow on the street. "There is someone outside." The master was frightened, realizing that he had not yet managed to lock the door at such a time. In the rain, no one would come to buy jewelry, which meant it was a robber. The master was so afraid he was ready to do anything to be spared when a hooded figure stepped into the store. "Is it possible to buy that pink diamond now?" asked the visitor, throwing back his hood. The shop owner immediately recognized Duke Cassio. "You came to buy a pink diamond. Come inside." The master smiled, feeling relieved that this was a customer of the store. And he himself rushed to the counter, asking to wait. He would bring the diamond now. And then he remembered that he had already sold that pink diamond that afternoon. "Oh, that was already bought by another client," he quietly answered the Duke. Hearing this, the Duke lost his temper. He rushed here without closing his eyes. He should have bought it right away. Richt was angry with himself, frightening the seller with his expression. After the initial fright, the master thought that since Duke Cassio himself had come to his shop, he could not let him go empty-handed. "Don't be so upset," he asked the buyer, and the Duke was indignant that he was not upset. And although the owner said that he had other good things, Richt replied that he was not interested in anything else. "You won't regret it." The owner's words sounded so confident that the man stopped. "This is an item from the Kingdom of Ibania, which is called the Paradise of Jewels. And this is a very rare thing." These words made Richt turn around. "Madam, happy birthday," came a joyful cry. "This is, although modest, a gift from me to you." Marie handed the box to Luciana. The girl was delighted and asked why Marie had prepared such a thing. But the maid did it from the bottom of her heart, and also said that she had received another gift. Luciana was surprised. It was only 7 in the morning. Marie quickly went out and returned with a box in her hands, on which lay a letter. It was a gift from Lorraine, and Lucy began to read the letter with delight. The gift was a small music box, and her brother congratulated the girl on her 20th birthday in a letter. Luciana read the letter tenderly, wondering when her brother had managed to do all this. "Ah, madam, we can't waste any more time. Come here quickly," Marie urged. And grabbing the lady by the hand, she dragged her somewhere. Having seated her on a chair, she informed her that the lady was the main character today, so it was time to start preparing, and she would try to make her a shining main character. Luciana was slightly intimidated by the maid's enthusiasm and asked her not to try so hard. "Besides, today is the day I get the magic candles. I'm sorry you have to go to Rodwell," the lady said. But Marie replied that everything was fine, and today was the day when the lady should shine. Besides, she was a little scared last time in Rodwell, but the lady told her to be more confident next time. Marie was very curious to see how that knight's rude attitude would change. In any case, the lady doesn't need to worry. She'll finish helping with the outfit and immediately go on the errand. A couple of hours later, on Rodwell Street, at the meeting place, Marie knocked on the door and quietly asked that if there was anyone inside, they should help her open the door. She had barely finished speaking when the door swung open, frightening the girl. But she immediately perked up. Why should she be afraid? Yes, today she will act more confidently. "Excuse me, as you can see, my hands are busy." The girl proudly raised her head when the door opened. Last time she received an empty box, so he must have specifically asked her to open the door. But today he was definitely noticeably calmer than before. Maybe it was because the lady told her to be more confident. "Still, the lady is the best," Marie admired, handing over the box with an important face. "You don't check scarves anymore." The girl became even bolder. The knight fell silent in embarrassment, thinking that this would not have had to be done if it had not been for his mistake. The Duke had previously reprimanded him for holding a knife to the maid's throat, which her mistress had informed him of. "Don't do such rude things again and behave well," Duke Cassio ordered. He stressed the importance of security, so Rick stepped up his vigilance. He couldn't even imagine that this would lead to such troubles. This maid was now too bold that she even reproached him for not answering her questions. Unable to tolerate this attitude, he turned around and answered too loudly, to which the girl theatrically expressed indignation. "Oh my God, are you mad right now? I'm so scared I'm going to faint." She rolled her eyes dramatically, but she became frightened when the knight came very close to her in a second. "I didn't apologize for my rudeness that day," the knight said, embarrassed, returning the empty box to her. Marie laughed slightly, saying it was okay, but realizing that she too had unwittingly gotten carried away. The knight smiled politely, casually thinking that no matter how you looked at it, she looked very much like those chatterboxes from the knightly order. Both the knight and the maid exchanged tense smiles and completed the exchange they had come here for. Considering the exchange complete, Marie said goodbye to the knight. "All the best," replied the knight, and he thought that this woman was very funny. That same evening at Leslie's estate, sitting in front of the mirror, surrounded by gifts, Luciana was glad that the party had gone off without a hitch. Now she needs to check what Marie brought from Rodwell. But this delivery method, no matter what you think, is very inefficient. Of course, thanks to this inconvenient method, she can continue her research without being caught. And yet, it takes 2 whole weeks to obtain the materials needed for research, which is too long. By the time she remembers what needs to be done, she will have already forgotten everything, and this is annoying. Besides, scenes from the mating season constantly pop up. The more Luciana thinks about it, the more she needs to calm down and focus on research. She needs to quickly do the research and break this imprinting. Upon opening the box, the girl immediately noticed a luxurious box. She asked for magic candles, but they cannot be in such a box. It may be an item that requires careful packaging and requires extreme caution, but when Lucy carefully opened the box, she was surprised to find a precious stone inside. This is definitely not what she asked for, but what is this gem for? Wait, is this really a mana stone? Is it also for the mating season? The girl concentrated, pouring in mana, but nothing worked. It's strange, it's not a mana stone, it's a regular gem. But the more Lucy looked, the more it seemed to her that it was not just an ordinary gemstone. It seemed to be the very lunette that the ladies were talking about at the ball. It seems to be all the rage these days, and they say it's hard to find even in the size of a grain of rice. Lunette is a pink stone with golden inclusions, reminiscent of autumn twilight. The ladies at the ball were surprised to realize that the color of the stone was similar to the color of Lady Leslie's hair, suggesting that it would suit her very well. And now, looking at the huge gem, Luciana wondered if it would really suit her. However, the girl thought about one more question. If this is indeed the lunette's gemstone of this size and quality, it must be worth a fortune. But why did Duke Cassio give it to her? She wondered if today was some special day. And then she remembered that today was her birthday. Could this really be her birthday gift from Duke Cassio? The realization of this stuck in her thoughts. It was so strange. No, it can't be. Rich doesn't even know when her birthday is, the girl laughed. Lucy doesn't know the details, but he probably just put it there by mistake. Having decided that she would return it to him later, Luciana decided to take up work, namely, the classification of magical herbs. After a few hours, everything was ready, and the girl was pleased with the good condition of the magical herbs. And now she needs to think of a more effective way to communicate with the Duke, instead of the current ineffective one. And then it was as if lightning struck her. She came up with such an obvious and very effective method, but she would rather die than suggest this method herself. But the research needs to be completed quickly, so there is nothing to be done. A week later, Richt was again waiting for the knight returning from Rodwell. "You're back from Rodwell." The Duke jumped out into the corridor like a jack-in-the-box, frightening Rick. He received the box from his hands and, praising him for his good work, lowered the knight. Rick watched the Duke walk away. He had scared him a lot. Had he really been waiting for him on purpose? Richt was eager to read the letter from Lady Leslie. "Hello, Duke. This is Luciana, daughter of the Marquis Leslie, writing to you." He read and smiled. The girl wrote that she was leaving him a letter because she wanted to make one proposal. Until now, they have been exchanging news through the maid in Rodwell, but Luciana thinks the waiting is taking too long. Reading this, Richt sadly realized that she wanted to finish the research quickly, but then he realized that she had a way to solve this problem. "In fact, I have an alternative. Perhaps it would be better for you and I, Duke, to meet in person," the letter read. But what Richt read next made him open his eyes in surprise. Luciana Leslie offered to meet him in his bedroom. The man's ears instantly turned red as a piece of memory came back to him. The girl wrote that if you use the artifact, you can secretly transfer things, and this will save time. Wouldn't it be easier if she visited his bedroom every time he gave the signal, since the artifact also had built-in return magic, that is, like during the mating season? And if the Duke agrees with her opinion, then let him give her a signal as on that day. And she added that around 11 in the evening, like last time, would be good. But Richt felt like he was missing something. He reread the letter from the very beginning again. Why was there not a word about the precious stone in the letter? He placed it so that it would be visible as soon as you opened the box, so she couldn't help but notice it. If she received the package, then she definitely saw the gift. What stupidity! Why do I even bother with such nonsense? Richt got angry, crumpling the letter. Whether she was touched or not when she saw this precious gift has nothing to do with him. After all, he bought the stone just like that he couldn't fall asleep that day, so he bought it for a sound sleep, Richt convinced himself. Sometime later, Duke Cassio visited the knight's training ground to talk to Rick. "There is no need to go to Rodwell from now on," the Duke said. Rick was taken aback by this news, and the image of a bright red-haired girl flashed before his eyes. Having difficulty recovering from the shock, the knight could only ask why. "What did you just say?" Duke Cassio's voice was metallic, and Rick instantly realized what nonsense he was talking about, so he immediately apologized and repeated the order not to go to Rodwell anymore. The knight reproached himself for his thoughtless words, but he did not understand what he was thinking at that moment. "You seem sorry you can't go there anymore." "What? Rodwell is covered in honey?" the Duke asked, and Rick flinched, remembering the red-haired maid. But he immediately pulled himself together and replied that this was not so. Anyway, that's all Richt wanted to tell him, just so he would keep it in mind. Having thanked the knight for his good work, the Duke left the parade ground. Feeling some relief, the knight still wondered why he suddenly remembered that maid again. She had caused him trouble until the very end, but they would not see each other again. A week later, the time approached that Luciana wrote in her letter to Richt. I wonder if he accepted her offer to meet in the bedroom. If he had accepted it, a signal would have appeared on the stone, and the moment the girl thought about it, the bracelet lit up. Stop. But since the signal came, it meant she had to go, but she didn't want to, because this would be the first meeting after that incident. After that incident, they parted on bad terms, or rather, Richt called it all a misunderstanding and suggested they forget about it. What can you do? If he has such a character, he is not the type to apologize. Therefore, it is necessary to break the imprinting and cut these chains as soon as possible. Resigned to the inevitable, Luciana closed her eyes slightly as she moved into the Duke's bedroom and opened them wide when she heard his voice. From now on, we will communicate in this way, Richt said, sitting on the bed. And he blushed deeply looking at the girl. Luciana, of course, noticed his strange reaction and was very surprised, and Richt became even more embarrassed. Not only was she dressed the same as she had been that night, but she also appeared without any caution. The Duke asked what she had brought, and the girl replied that they were documents related to the research. Here, this is the plan I made. Luciana handed him the documents. It is clear from her that she is currently constantly conducting experiments, but the process is quite long. The Duke probably wants the research results to appear as soon as possible, but unfortunately it will take some more time. So she wanted to ask him a few things and prepared to take notes, as she would need to start doing detailed work later. The Duke had previously said that Cassio's ducal family had werewolves in its roots. Richt confirmed this, and then the girl asked the next question. Perhaps you too, Duke, are capable of becoming a wolf, she asked with an innocent look. The man asked again what she meant. Does she mean the wolf-man metaphor, or can he even turn into a real wolf? That's right. To get the correct result, it matters how much werewolf blood you inherit, Lucy said. And she was quite surprised when Richt replied that he had heard about such a possibility. But over time, the ability to transform gradually disappeared, so Richt Cassio cannot take the form of a beast. Although this ability has disappeared, the influence of werewolf blood still remains in the blood of the ducal family, so their physical abilities are far superior to those of ordinary people. Luciana wrote everything down carefully, completely captivated by his story. The more the girl looked at him, the more embarrassed Richt became, but he still added that thanks to this, the family line continued, even if only one child was born. I think that's enough. Luciana was frightened. She didn't think the conversation would turn to procreation. That wasn't in the original, so without even noticing it, she listened with great interest. By the way, she thought that he was strong simply because he was the main character, but it turns out there was a reason for all this, but at least she satisfied her curiosity. And finally, Lucy remembered the precious stone in the box. The way the girl said it so casually, and the fact that she even brought it with her, discouraged the Duke. Richt did not say a word, frozen like a stone statue. Since he had already given it, he should have just taken it silently. He didn't think that she would return it. Wait, didn't she think that this stone was for her? Luciana also froze. She thought that as soon as he saw the stone, he would get angry and grab it, as if it had ended up in her hands by mistake. She thought painfully about the reason for all this. Richt also felt quite uncomfortable about the situation. This is a reward, the Duke suddenly blurted out. The girl was taken aback. What kind of reward? Did she really do something special? To which the Duke, looking away, replied that she was, after all, responsible for the research. The girl still thought that this was too much for a reward. Didn't he know that it was a lunette when he gave it to her? It's a moon, Richt said, making Lucy even more surprised. I don't need it. It's better to take it back, Duke. The girl smiled, wondering why, if he knew the value of the stone, he still wanted to give it to her. But Richt pushed the box back to Luciana and said that she would take it, because it was also an apology for that day. His words puzzled Luciana even more. What kind of apology for that day? Was Duke Cassio really apologizing to her now? I apologize for the words I said the morning after that incident. I was rude and didn't push you on purpose. Richt looked at her so openly. He tried to explain why he did this, but froze, completely unsure of what to say. Lucy also froze. She realized that Richt was behaving strangely. But then I started to worry whether everything was okay with him. Richta was becoming more and more captivated by the memories of days gone by. In his memories, his mother was a wonderful person. All of high society spoke of how Duke Cassio valued his wife very much. Everyone wanted to say hello to the Duchess, even though she doesn't usually go out, and no one paid any attention to the little boy. Little Richt was also looking for his mother, and soon found her. He wanted to get some love from his mother. The woman beamed with happiness, but did not even look at her son. "Mom?" Richt called, and the woman's mood instantly changed. "Then goodbye, Letty," the stranger said and headed for the exit, even though the woman asked him to stop, calling him by name, Damon. Richt asked his mother who this uncle was. But his mother never answered him. She was very cold with her son. The woman never said another word to her own son. That evening, Richt was left alone, just like any other. The little boy found things to do on his own and interacted with the servants, never forgetting his mother for a second. He even asked the gardener to pick a bouquet of flowers. Mom had been in her bedroom a lot lately, and the boy hoped she would like the bouquet. "It's all because of you. This pattern is disgusting and terrible," the woman screamed. Duke Cassio tried his best to calm his wife, but Letizia seemed to have gone mad. At some point, she saw her son, and their eyes met. "You and this child who looks like you are disgusting together," the Duchess screamed hysterically. The boy froze on the threshold, sincerely not understanding why his mother hated both him and his father so much. And he froze, hearing disgusting like monsters. Earlier, his father took him to the secret door and told him that it was time for him to learn the family secret. The blood of the wolf runs in Cassio's family. Only then did Richt realize that his mother considered them monsters because they had the blood of another race. Will he too have to live alone in the future, misunderstood and rejected? Will he really have to beg for love all his life, clinging to it? Time passed, and his mother's health deteriorated as Richt grew older. Duke Cassio sat by his wife's bedside for days on end, begging her not to leave him. Cursed blood, disgusting and terrible. That's all the woman said without even looking at her husband. Richt understood that his mother was never able to forgive him until the very end, and he missed her so much. Suddenly, the dying woman's lips stretched into a smile. "Demon," she exhaled, transported back to that carefree time for her. With her last breath, Duchess Cassio closed her eyes for the last time. This came as a complete surprise to the men, and the question of who Damon was hung in the air. The design on the woman's wrist disappeared, which meant that the imprint had disappeared, and that in turn meant only one thing. "Letitia, how can you leave me and go away? Until the very end it was Damon. Until the very end, why this bastard?" The Duke shook the lifeless body in despair, but it was already over. "Even after 3 months, my father still missed my mother." He hardly spoke to his son, but only asked him to leave him alone with the things of his beloved woman, unable to come to terms with her death. How long will the father cling to the mother? But after her death, time continued to flow. Richt had already grown up completely. One day, Richt went to his father, not really hoping for anything. Today he is again in his mother's room, probably drinking again. Even after 10 years of estrangement, he still cannot forget her. "Father, this is Richt. I'll just come in for a moment," he said, stopping in front of the door, but there was only silence in response. The young man was overcome by a bad feeling, and he opened the door. In the gloomy semi-darkness of the room, his father was lying on his mother's bed, but there was something strange in his serene pose. And only the next moment Richt noticed a trickle of blood from his mouth and a small bottle next to it. The young man was horrified by the realization of what his father had done. Why did he do this? Did he really love his departed mother so much that he could never forget her? But why? The imprinting was broken. It's all because of this damned blood of another race. It's all because of the damned imprinting. Even after Richt buried his father, he remembered his parents mentioning the name Damon. In the end, unable to contain his curiosity, he ordered a study. The request was anonymous, and soon the answer came: Letitia had a lover before marriage. Duke Calix Cassio fell in love with Letizia Radice at first sight, but Letizia resolutely rejected his advances. However, Duke Cassio offered marriage in exchange for money, and her parents married Letizia to Duke Cassio. Reading the report, Richt understood the mother's behavior and sympathized with her. In addition, the man named Damon, whom he inquired about further, went missing 4 years ago, so there is no information about him. Could all this really be my father's doing? Could it really be that he did away with Damon? And the mother, it seems, guessed about this, which is why she hated her father so much. Thus the puzzle came together, and the truth became clear, and Richt, like his father, faced a painful end due to imprinting. If he really does go down the same path as his father, going crazy with love and ruining someone's life, begging for reciprocity, no, there will be no such tragedy in his life. Duke, Duke, a female voice broke through the haze of memories. Gradually, his vision returned, along with an understanding of where he was. Returning to the present, the young man saw the girl's worried face right in front of him. It was as if Richt had seen her so close and so worried for the first time. Duke, are you okay? Luciana was actually very worried about his condition. The girl was worried about the Duke. He had turned so pale. There's no need to force yourself to talk. It's all in the past, she said softly, touching his shoulder. At some point, Richt seemed to come to his senses and sat up in his chair. His face came even closer to the girl's face, which made her shudder in surprise. Keep the lunettes for yourself, lady, said the Duke, pushing the box towards her. Luciana instantly blushed in embarrassment, and for a moment she thought he was going to kiss her. Richt, meanwhile, said that the precious stone was also his gratitude, and he would like her to accept it. Still, Luciana thought it was too generous a gift for an apology. In the end, Lucy accepted him. He didn't seem to have any intention of taking it back. Nothing could be done. But Richt looked a little worried and concerned, and so sad. And now Luciana was tormented by the question of why. Heavy boots stepped almost silently along the paved road. They understood because he had stupidly lost his badge. Damn, now he was at a dead end. The hooded figure was starting to get angry. This shouldn't be the case. If he lingered here, this man would definitely come for him. As soon as he thought so, he heard movement behind him. The next moment, the hooded man lay on the ground with a dagger in his leg. And you hid well all this time. If you couldn't complete the mission, you should have died immediately. All you do is run away like a rat. Another man in a hood that completely hid his face said in an ingratiating voice. What are you saying? I did exactly as I was told, the wounded man shouted. But as soon as he mentioned that he had slipped something into the Duke's glass, they immediately shut his mouth and ordered him to shut up, because no one had allowed him to speak. Your mission failed because you ended up missing the Duke, said the darkness under the hood, raising a dagger over the lying figure. Drops of blood fell on his face. The stranger only sighed with displeasure. Soon he would have to arrange everything again. Soon the time came again for their next meeting. Luciana sat down in the same place as last time and said that she had good news. It seems they can finally move on to the next step. I have identified the basic combination that will be used in the research. Luciana could barely contain her joy as she handed him the list. But Rich didn't quite understand this was different from the materials she had requested earlier. Yes, they are difficult to store, and this time there are a lot of materials, so it might be a hassle, the girl answered apologetically. But when the Duke replied that it didn't matter, since the assistant was doing the preparations anyway, Luciana became angry, feeling like a worker ant who was doing everything himself. But deciding that in any case the research would be impossible without his assistance, the girl apologized for disturbing him and asked him to give her some of his hair. The man was surprised, but Luciana reassured him that she only needed 5 or 6 strands, and without waiting for his answer, she touched Duke Cassio's head. In order to take a few strands, the girl grabbed the man's head with one hand and lifted the strands with the other, while Rich closed his eyes, feeling that he was about to die from the fact that she was too close. At some point, the girl noticed his facial expression. Rich closed his eyes, sweat appeared on his face, as if he was afraid that she would tear out all his hair. The girl pulled his hair carefully but quickly and strongly. With a satisfied smile, the girl said that now everything was probably a little painful for him. "Then I think I'll be going," Luciana said, yawning mid-sentence. Looking at her, Rich noted that she was definitely too focused on the research. But what if something happens? In the Duke's eyes, the girl has been overtired lately, and obeying an impulse, Rich suggested that she conduct her research more slowly. But Luciana didn't understand what he meant by doing research more slowly. I appreciate you saying this out of concern for my health, but shouldn't the imprinting be broken as soon as possible? She asked. After all, this is the only way they can each live their own lives. Hearing her words, Rich perked up. Jumping up to the girl, he loudly asked what this meant. Lucy immediately felt that the atmosphere had changed. Had she said something wrong? But she couldn't say that he already had a destined mate. But she could say it with a hint. Well, who knows? Maybe in the future you'll meet the person destined for you, the girl said as naturally as possible. But her words left the Duke even more stupefied. What the hell other person is destined for me was all he could ask, starting to get angry. His reaction confused Luciana even more. Well, even if you don't meet the person destined for you, there's no reason to relax, the girl noted philosophically. And she reminded the Duke that they had simply become connected by an accident. These words hurt Risht. If you think about it, there was some truth in them, but why did they grate on his ears so much? Deciding that their conversation was over, Luciana asked to give her a signal as soon as the materials were ready. And she was about to leave, but Rich suddenly stopped the girl, noticing the blood on her face. In the blink of an eye, the man rushed towards her. "Wait, don't move," he said, holding Luciana's nose with his hands. And then he reproached her that in such a state she still says that she is not overexerting herself. "Be patient, even if it's a little uncomfortable, until the bleeding stops," Rich asked quietly. The longer they stood like that, the more Luciana felt her cheeks flush. She was grateful for the help, but wasn't he too close? After some time, Rich removed his hand from her face. It seemed the bleeding had stopped, and asked her to wait a little. Luciana froze in place, wondering where he went. She was still standing in the middle of the room next to her suitcase, but she didn't have to wait long. "Wait. Turn your head a little," Rich said, putting something to her nose. Lucy felt the cold, wet fabric and realized that he had wet his handkerchief. She raised her surprised eyes to him. Both then and now, why does he behave so tenderly? She just can't get used to it. After Rich apologized, his attitude seemed to change. But why be so protective? She's not a child, she won't do that. "I'll do it myself," Luciana screamed, raising her hand and closing her eyes. But the Duke had already removed the handkerchief from her nose, and the blood had stopped flowing. The girl laughed tensely, wondering when he had managed to become so distant. Every time he behaves like this, she forgets about everything for a moment. Forgets that this tenderness is merely the influence of imprinting. "Is that also because of the imprinting?" Luciana asked. The man stared at her in surprise, not understanding what she was talking about. "Don't worry, I still remember what you said about not having illusions," the girl said, passing by Rich. Luciana had a rough idea why he told her that. He was probably worried that she might misunderstand something. In the original, there were already quite a few people trying to get the main character's attention. What can I say if Luciana Leslie was one of those? So she was also afraid that she would become intrusive. And she doesn't like the whole situation either, but to be polite, the girl asked to give her a handkerchief. It got dirty because of her, so she'll wash it and return it. "No need, he's far from feminine," Richt answered thoughtfully. And he asked if the lady was going to wash it with her own hands. And only then did Lucy realize that she hadn't thought about the fact that a man's scarf would definitely raise questions from the maids. "Then now I really will go," said the girl. Clutching the bracelet in her hands, she imbued it with mana. And the next moment she had already dissolved, leaving the Duke alone. He clutched a handkerchief in his hands, remembering her words. "I still remember your words," she said. And Rich sadly realized that he had said a lot of unpleasant things to her so far. "It's such a pity. Do you also want to live the same miserable life as your father?" A voice rang out. Rich didn't want this, but his dark self added that he had already fallen in love with her. "Before, you would have immediately erased any trace of a woman left on your things," he said, hinting at the scarf. "Look at yourself now, no matter how much you close your eyes and ears, and do not deny, in the end, you are also the same descendant of this family." Time went on as usual. The snowy winter gave way to a blooming spring. So much time had passed. Looking at the blossoming flowers, Rich remembered her. The last time he saw her was last week, and tomorrow he will be able to see her again. A soft female voice called out to Duke Cassio, and he instantly turned around at this call. "It's been a while. How have you been?" the girl asked, hiding her face under an umbrella. It was Deborah Mandy, the main character of the original novel. The girl began to say that she had been coming to the mansion all this time, but they constantly told her that he was not there, and Rich immediately lost interest in her. He replied that this had been conveyed to him, but he asked her not to pretend that they were acquainted unnecessarily had she really forgotten about this. "I'm sorry if that was unpleasant for you." Deborah blushed, and she tried to explain that she was just so happy to see him. And she herself thought that something had happened to the Duke. He seemed even colder. But she still has to say what she wanted. She just needs to gather up the courage. "Excuse me, Duke, but would you by any chance like to be my partner at the upcoming spring festival?" the girl asked. But the Duke, without thinking, said that he didn't even see the point in answering this. His answer upset Deborah so much that she visibly wilted, but she still decided to ask why. "Do you really already have another partner?" the girl asked hesitantly. But the Duke had no intention of continuing this conversation. His eyes flashed red. Deborah immediately apologized for keeping him for so long. But as she left, she was painfully wondering if she had said something wrong, or if perhaps Duke Cassio had found another woman. The thought was so sudden that Deborah stopped and turned around, intending to ask another question, but there was no one in the greenhouse anymore. That same evening, a servant brought the Duke an invitation to a spring festival. The Spring Festival is an annual imperial event where the most beautiful woman is chosen, who will then receive the title of Goddess of Spring. Besides this, most nobles are looking for a partner for marriage, or they are looking forward to spending sweet time with the bride or groom. That is, the Spring Festival is an event that is eagerly awaited by lonely noblemen dreaming of love. And from this year onwards, it will be hosted by the second princess, Idris von Adelia. "Duke Cassio, there have been strange rumors about you lately. You really are impotent." This is how the second princess greeted him last time. After reading the postscript, in which the princess hoped that he would definitely come, Rich realized that the lover of schemes was restless and clearly wanted to drag him into something again. She always did this, from the very first time we met. Although this year it will be an event that does not concern him. While thinking like this, Rich did not forget about the time Lady Leslie was due to arrive soon. "Hello, Duke, how have you been?" came the voice. Luciana was as precise as a clock, and the girl held a box in her hands. Seeing her, the young man flushed with embarrassment, noting to himself that she looked different from usual. After greeting the girl and asking how she was doing, Rich took the box from her hands. But as soon as the girl passed by him, the man's nose caught an unusual smell. The smell was so different from the smell of her usual soap that Rich even said so out loud. Luciana was surprised, and the Duke blushed, realizing that he had said it out loud without noticing it. Pretending as if nothing had happened, the young man carried the box to the table as calmly as possible. But the girl clearly heard his words, and now she was puzzled in her soul as to what smell he meant. She had just washed herself and thought she smelled nice. They spent the next hour sorting through documents and new information. That was all Lucy wanted to convey to the Duke, and he added that if she needed anything, she should let him know separately. "Yes, Duke," the girl smiled, glad that she would be able to leave early today. And then she noticed a red envelope on the table next to the Duke. "And I realized that this was an invitation to a spring festival. A few days ago, she also received this invitation. Lady Leslie had not attended it in previous years, but this time she thought about it. It looks like the lady has also received an invitation. You will be going to the spring festival?" Rich asked, noticing her interest. Slightly embarrassed by this question, the girl replied that she had decided to go. Even though she doesn't want to, she has to go. She has no reason to disobey the will of the second princess. The lady is going to a spring festival, Rich slowly realized, but then it turns out she will be another man's partner. A vivid picture of Luciana happily dancing with someone else appeared before Rich's eyes. Damn, even imagining it makes him feel like he's going crazy. He can't stop her from going, but there's something that can. "Excuse me, how about coming with me?" asked Duke Cassio, embarrassed and blushing. Lucian's eyes widened in surprise. And then an unpleasant chill came over her, to go to the spring festival together. Is he in his right mind? How will people around him react if they become partners? She could hear the gossip of those around her, and the questions about how they met, and what was going on between them. Everything would become too obvious. So why is he suggesting this? In the original, he was with the main character, not with her. Then the girl looked at her wrist and remembered. If everything had gone according to the original, Rich, at Deborah's request, would have gone to a boring social meeting and would have spent the time very romantically. But because of the imprinting, everything went wrong. Luciana already realized that the urge to wipe her nose was strange. The offer to become partners was also likely a consequence of the imprinting. Okay, don't pay attention. Since I started talking like that, don't get any illusions. That's what he would usually say. So why is he so meek today? In any case, she had to refuse him, which is what Luciana did. But the Duke immediately asked why she refused. You and I, Duke, are hardly officially acquainted, the girl explained. If they suddenly appear together as partners, wouldn't it be a shame to waste time hiding the fact that they know each other? Rich froze, without knowing it, like a fool. He couldn't restrain himself and blurted out something too much. And then Luciana added that even if this were not the reason, she still would have to refuse. I already have a partner with whom I agreed to go, the girl said simply. Rich's heart sank when he heard her say those words. She already has a partner. But who is he? These thoughts made the man plunge into the abyss of despair. Luciana noticed that he was frowning again. She couldn't understand him at all. Deciding that she had better leave as soon as possible, the girl jumped up from her seat and began to thank him for the offer. Well, I think I'll be going now, she said, preparing the travel bracelet. Rich also jumped up from his seat and tried to stop her, but Luciana had already poured mana into the bracelet. And the next moment she disappeared, leaving Duke Cassio alone again. Who is she going to go with? Who did she choose as her partner? If they are partners, they will have to dance and spend a lot of time together. What if they liked each other in a romantic way? From such thoughts, Rich felt a fire of rage flaring up inside him. First, he needs to calm down anyway. The lady is going to the spring festival. And to attend the spring festival, he also definitely needs a partner. Mistress Luciana, it's time for you to get up. Marie wailed no worse than an alarm clock, but the mistress continued to sleep, asking for 5 more minutes. Finding no other way, the maid simply pulled the blanket off her mistress. The perfect season has finally arrived for you, madam. Marie opened the window. She was filled with energy, unlike Luciana. Having somehow managed to get out of bed, the girl asked what this meant, and the maid replied that this time she simply had to become the goddess of spring. And she reminded him that Lady Leslie always skipped the spring holidays, citing her busy schedule with her studies. From her enthusiastic mood, Lucy realized that this time she couldn't get out of it. So sit down quickly, we still have a long way to go, said Marie. Having surrendered herself into the hands of the maid, Luciana simply resigned herself to the fact that today she would again not be able to cook in a simple way. And although she did not object to the maid's efforts, in her heart she thought that there was no need to try so hard. After all, the place of the goddess of spring has long been taken. And then Lucy wondered, if Deborah were going to the spring festival, who would she go with? Rich said he wouldn't go, so is the plot changing again. Here her thoughts were interrupted by Marie's voice, who asked her to look in the mirror. You really are so beautiful, the maid said admiringly, and the girl blushed slightly. And although Luciana was pleased to hear this, she still slightly pulled her back, saying that someone might hear. But Marie insisted that it was true, and everyone thought the same thing. Having finished her preparations, Luciana went downstairs, where her partner was already waiting. You said you'd just look at me, so why are you all dressed up Louis Dalton, Luciana's cousin? Asked with a smile. The girl smiled back and asked how long he had been waiting. By the way, you seem to have grown up since our last meeting, she teased her brother. But he answered in the same tone that it was she who had become shorter, and the young people headed towards the carriage. Just kidding. Come on, sit down, Lady Leslie, who looks like a lily of the valley, the brother mocked. These words almost turned Luciana into a monster. But I pulled myself together. He will be an adult in a few months, but he still behaves like a child. Sister, when will you pay me for hiring me? Louis asked when they were in the carriage, and the girl became irritated again. She had already said that she would send the money. To which Louis remarked that he liked her determination. Luciana was glad that he was obsessed with money, because that was why they were able to go together. But, sister, judging by your face, you don't really want to go to the spring festival, so why are you paying me money to go there with you? The young man was perplexed. Luciana couldn't ignore her reputation in society, so she needed to be present, and those who offered her to become their partner were too intrusive. But her brother didn't need to know that, so the girl casually replied that she was already constantly sitting at home. It was time to show up. Louis remarked that she lived too tiresomely. What difference did it make what others said? But the girl replied that he was the strange one. When they arrived at the venue, Lucy was delighted with the surroundings. Her brother recalled that it was her first time at the spring festival, and the girl confirmed that she hadn't had time because of the academy. But Louis, there really are a lot of people here, Luciana noted, joining the crowd of other couples like them. Both brother and sister only now realized that they would have to spend several hours in this crowd. I don't think it's profitable. It looks like I'll have to ask for extra payment, said Louis, which again caused his sister's displeasure. She literally pounced on the laughing scoundrel, indignant that he dared to ask for more. Their little squabble was interrupted by an enthusiastic female cry. It was Duke Cassio. Luciana was surprised that he came, and then she saw the Duke herself. He really is very handsome. It's not for nothing that he was described in the original as a handsome man of the highest class. The girl thought for a moment, if Duke Cassio was here, it meant he came with his partner. And then she saw Richt's partner next to him. This was the deputy commander of the Knightly Order of Karate. But then it turns out that he is not Deborah's partner. In the original, Richt only came at Deborah's request, so he had no other reason to come to the spring festival, so why did he come, and with another partner at that? While Luciana was thinking, Louis, who was standing next to her, nudged her with his elbow, and the girl perked up, wondering if he was really going to play a joke again. But when she turned to her brother, her eyes widened in surprise. Why was this familiar image so close, even right in front of her? Raising her head a little higher, Luciana discovered Duke Cassio in close proximity to her, and then she was overcome with horror at the realization that so many people were looking at them. Thinking she had gone crazy, the girl felt like a Red Sea miracle. Trying to pull herself together and deal with it, Luciana greeted the Duke with a smile. I am pleased to meet you for the first time, Your Excellency the Duke. I am Luciana Leslie, daughter of the Marquis Leslie, she introduced herself, and Louis did the same, calling himself the second son of the Earl of Dalton. Richt Cassio, the Duke introduced himself coldly. The man kept his eyes on Luciana and her partner, making the young people feel quite uncomfortable. No, he should have just ignored me as a screen. Why does he confuse me so much? The girl was indignant in her soul, trying to tell Richt everything with her eyes. Is he trying to intimidate her? Maybe this is a hint that he needs to show results faster. Was she really that tactless, Luciana wondered, as the Duke became interested in her partner. Richt clarified Louis's affiliation. Dalton, after all, is a region known for its textile industry. Yes, that's right. It's especially famous for the quality of its silk, Louis replied, feeling strange. The Duke seems friendly, but at the same time he seems like he's about to strike. But then Luciana came between them and with the sweetest smile, thanked the Duke for his kind words. After all, Dalton County is also her father's family. Richt asked her again what she had said, and immediately realized that they were related on the family tree, and Luciana added that Louis was her cousin. Duke Cassio instantly experienced a range of emotions, the main one being relief. But also, confusion was growing in the man's soul if her partner was a cousin. Then it turned out that he had mistakenly selected candidates among the available ones. In any case, this means that there is nothing between them, Richt smiled. His smile undoubtedly attracted the attention of everyone around him. Luciana felt increasingly out of place. Why was he just standing there and doing nothing? And why had he even started smiling? People were constantly looking at them. The girl had already begun to mentally pray for someone to stop this, when a surprised female voice was heard, and everyone turned to the girl who had approached. Duke, how have you been? Deborah, although surprised, was even happier to see Richt. She was about to say that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, but then her foot tripped over a stone. Deborah screamed, but immediately felt that someone had caught her. Overjoyed that the Duke had caught her, the girl happily thanked him, but another girl answered her. But I don't think I've seen you before, lady, Deborah said, embarrassed, assuming that this was Richt's beloved. I am Yvonne Roan, Deputy Commander of the Knightly Order of Karat. Today I became the Duke's partner at the request of the commander, the girl answered. Wow, that's how it is, no wonder. I immediately noticed that your posture is very graceful, Deborah admired. The girl sincerely admired Yvonne, showering her with compliments. Luciana noticed such a friendly atmosphere and decided that now was the time to run away from here, but Louis said that they could leave without saying anything. Of course you can, Lucy said confidently. For secondary characters like them, it's better not to get involved with the main characters, let them shine there on their own. By the way, she was surprised. She didn't think that Deborah would suddenly appear alone. The main characters, in theory, were supposed to be together. But they came with other partners and continue this awkward conversation. For some reason, this gives me a strange feeling in my soul. We have gathered here for a wonderful spring festival. I welcome everyone. Thanks to you, the ball will be magnificent. So without further ado, let's get down to business," announced the second princess. The ball began. Couples whirled in dance and had fun. Deborah tried to stay close to the Duke, dreaming of dancing with him. She even tried to ask him if he wanted to dance with her, but Rich didn't seem to even notice her, continuing to look somewhere ahead. The girl was embarrassed. It seemed she was talking alone again. But why is the Duke in such a bad mood? "Sister, about His Grace the Duke," Louis asked as he and Lucy danced. The young man suggested that the Duke was interested in Lady Leslie, which made her twitch nervously. "What's so terrible about that?" Louis asked, noticing her reaction, and his sister, blushing, replied that she was simply talking nonsense. Anyway, he suddenly started asking me a bunch of questions, which made me wonder why he was acting like this, Louis said thoughtfully. He was worried. It was not clear why, but it seemed to him that the Duke was interested in their family, but in a bad way. Luciana found it strange to hear this from her cousin, and she didn't know how to react. "I hope it's just my imagination," but from the very beginning the Duke persistently looked only at him. Luciana looked at the Duke from behind her brother, but as soon as their eyes met, the man blushed deeply. Knowing that everyone is looking at him, he continues to behave this way. It is so obvious to everyone. Will he really hate without reason? Luciana tried to calm her brother, but he was too frightened by the Duke's dark gaze. The girl assumed that he just had that look in his eyes, but Louis was unstoppable. Maybe he didn't say hello quickly enough or said something wrong, but Luciana couldn't tell him that it wasn't him at all. After the dance, some of the girls gathered for tea in the garden, where they were joined by Lady Haley, who had a white cat in her arms. The girls were quite surprised, but Lady Haley replied that the second Princess Idris had given them permission to come with the cat. Luciana looked at the animal with affection. She hadn't seen cats for a long time. The cat's name was Eliza, and sitting on the table she began to wash herself. Lucy noticed that she had a tiny tongue, and the cat noticed her too and suddenly hissed warningly. The girls around were calmly talking to each other, not noticing the cat's wary behavior, and Luciana was embarrassed. Deciding to distract herself, she wanted to drink tea, but her cup was empty. She turned to ask the waiter for more tea, and at that moment the animal rushed to attack. The next moment, the girl felt a sharp pain in her arm, and frightened screams were heard around her. "Oh, what should I do? My God, there's a scratch on your face. I'm so sorry. She's usually calm." Lady Haley was genuinely worried, holding her favorite. Luciana didn't immediately notice the scratches on her face, but now she felt that they hurt a little. But still, seeing Lady Haley's condition, she believed that this was no reason to cry. Deciding not to make a big deal out of it, the girl said she was fine and that it was just scratches. "I'm so sorry. I'll give you gloves even better than these," Lady Haley said, but Luciana replied that she had spare ones. Lady Leslie went to tidy herself up. Along the way, she noticed that the more she walked with this wound, the more it hurt. The cat's claws turned out to be sharper than she thought. While thinking about what had happened, she didn't notice how she had run into someone's chest. She looked up, intending to apologize, and froze, Duke Cassio looking at her very carefully. "Where did this wound come from?" the man cried out a second later, grabbing the girl by the chin. Luciana froze in indignation and blushed with embarrassment. "What are you doing now? What if people see?" the girl asked in a whisper. But Rich continued to feel her face. Then, deciding that she had to push him away herself, Luciana raised her hand. There is also a wound on the lady's hand. Rich was horrified and immediately became angry. Who dared to do this to her? Luciana was taken aback by his reaction because they were only small scratches. "It looks like a mark from a beast's claws. If you leave it like this, it might leave a scar," the Duke worried, stroking her hand. "We're too close now." Luciana awkwardly pulled her hand away. Suddenly, the full scale of the situation dawned on Rich and what they could actually see. "It was a mistake on my part. I will go," the Duke said. But as he passed by the girl, he asked her to apply the medicine anyway, and he left, leaving Luciana standing in bewilderment at his words. Luciana went for a walk, but she was very careful not to accidentally run into Rich again. He constantly does unpredictable things, so all she can do is avoid him. In any case, it seems that he is not here, and you can walk around in peace. As soon as she thought this, a male voice was heard nearby. "Long time no see," said the man, reaching out and removing a leaf from her hat. "We haven't seen each other since last year's ball." The man in front of her smiled earnestly, and she immediately recognized Dmitri. "You didn't show up, and I already thought that you had forgotten me. You remember me." He grabbed the girl's hand without asking. Luciana froze in a stupor, wondering how she could forget the one who so persistently tried to touch her at the last ball. This man had a very nasty attitude towards women. He kept trying to touch her as if by accident and constantly talked about his beloved self, so now Luciana pulled her hand away very abruptly. Dmitri asked if she came with Dalton, but he is her cousin. So she doesn't have another man. Finally, the situation is a little favorable to him, so Dmitri asked if she didn't like his gift. I ordered earrings made of that expensive stone especially for you. The man touched her earlobe, which immediately caused Luciana's indignation at what he was allowing himself to do. I'm talking about Rosefina's spring, Dmitri continued, not at all embarrassed by her reaction. No matter how many thorns she produced, she was only a woman. Beginning to get angry, Luciana remembered those 2 pink diamonds that she had immediately thrown into the warehouse. They suit me perfectly, she went on the attack, but the man calmly replied that he understood that women's tastes are picky. It was like a battle of spear and shield, and Dmitri parried skillfully. Moreover, he asked if she would like to dance, since they had met so fatefully. No, I don't want to, the girl answered without thinking. For a moment, Dmitri was taken aback, but then he smiled. Oh, come on! Today is a great opportunity to finish our conversation. Dmitri went on the offensive, grabbing her by the waist and pulling her towards him. Luciana realized that he wasn't listening to her at all, and as luck would have it, no one around them was paying any attention to them. It was the same at the last ball, and he is doing the same thing again. Luciana couldn't stand it anymore. He probably does the same to other ladies. There was a loud thud, and Dmitri fell to the ground unconscious. Lucy continued to clench her fists, but after a moment she realized that she hadn't done anything yet. But who then showed her such a courtesy? Looking up, the girl discovered Duke Cassio nearby. At that moment, the people around suddenly noticed that some person had fallen, and they began to approach him with curiosity. Luciana felt lost, because without wanting to, she had attracted everyone's attention. Duke Cassio is right there, isn't he, Lady Leslie? Whispers were heard in the crowd. The guards immediately arrived and asked what had happened. Some guy was pestering a girl who didn't like it, Duke Cassio answered calmly. But the guards, looking sideways at Luciana, asked in what sense he was pestering her. The lady must explain everything to you. Richt's voice became threatening, and the guards immediately responded negatively. Trying to reconstruct the events, they asked what was happening. The Duke instantly knocked the villain unconscious, thereby helping the lady. What a noise, said the majestic voice of Princess Idris, as gossip about Duke Cassio and Lady Leslie began to spread through the crowd. Seeing the chaos, the princess ordered one of the guards to report, and she listened with great skepticism as he told her that the young gentleman lying there had been rude to Lady Leslie, and that it seemed Duke Cassio had stopped him. Lady, is everything I heard true? Asked the princess, and Luciana confirmed everything. The princess found the whole story quite surprising. Duke Cassio, known for his indifference to all ladies, saved Lady Leslie. Whispers ran through the crowd, wondering if all of this was true, and if it was what it seemed like. Even Deborah was surprised by everything that was happening and clearly drew some conclusions. Seeing Deborah in the crowd, Luciana became scared. This situation in itself is very strange, but if Deborah also begins to doubt her relationship with Richt, then everything will be very bad. The princess looked with interest at Lady Leslie, frozen in thought. Why is this lady so serious? The princess's head was spinning with possible interpersonal relationships. Maybe they really do have some kind of relationship. It's interesting, but as a princess she must maintain her dignity, so she decided not to interfere in their relationship. As the organizer, I apologize for his rudeness, she told Luciana, and the girl replied that Her Highness had nothing to worry about. Having decided that the conflict was over, the princess suggested heading to the heart of the celebration. When His Highness left, a worried Louis came running to Lucy. He was very worried and apologized for not being there for her. Having calmed her brother, the girl hurried him to return to the ballroom. The event would soon begin. Confused, Louis went to fetch his sister. But as he left, he turned around to look at the remaining man. Did Duke Cassio really save his sister, and most importantly, why? So, the candidates for the title of Goddess of this year's Spring Festival are Lily Narsha, Natalia Hohen, and Deborah Mandy, the second princess announced. Luciana was genuinely happy to hear Deborah's name. Now all that was left for her to do was win. And Luciana Leslie, the princess announced, stunning the girl. The candidates were asked to come on stage, but Lucy was so confused that she couldn't move, and Louis was genuinely happy for his sister. Luciana was so focused on the main character Deborah that she didn't even think about the fact that she could be chosen too. "I didn't know there were so many men with poor eyesight," Louis quipped, earning him a jab with his elbow. "Anyway, there are other candidates, so she can just blend in, but damn, why is she standing here? Right next to the majestic main character, but in the novel it was different." "Hello, Lady Leslie. I believe this is the first time we've spoken to each other," Deborah began the conversation. Luciana, still under the impression of what had happened, awkwardly replied that it just happened that way. Deborah noticed that she looked a little tense, and Lady Leslie confirmed that she was indeed tense. "I'm nervous now too," Deborah laughed sheepishly. Luciana's heart skipped a beat. The main character is so beautiful, sweet, and charming. The brighter Deborah shines, the more restless my soul becomes. If it hadn't been for the night, everything would have been fine, but Luciana asked her out loud not to worry. "Everything will be fine," the girl confidently declared. Even though the first button was fastened incorrectly from the very beginning, all the main characters only briefly lost their way. "I think you, lady, will be the goddess of spring this year," Luciana said, and Deborah blushed slightly. The results of the spring festival were soon announced. "This year's goddess of spring is Deborah Mandy," the princess announced, to the winner's genuine surprise. Luciana just smiled contentedly. Everything was going according to plan. With that, the spring festival was declared closed, and Lucy felt relieved. Because of someone, it was so hard for her, and she doesn't want to remember it anymore. In any case, she will live peacefully for some time, so she will soon forget everything. Maybe there is something between them. She heard a mysterious whisper and immediately realized that they were talking about her. People around were whispering that there was definitely something between her and Duke Cassio, but what about Lady Mandy then? It wasn't just one or two people who were saying this. Literally everyone was talking about it, and Luciana had no choice but to pretend she hadn't heard anything, but her thoughts were interrupted by a loud male voice. "Now, Lady Leslie, don't you think, is more suited to the role of the goddess of spring," Duke Cassio said calmly. Luciana, like Louis, was shocked by Richard's words that the title of Goddess of Spring was given to the wrong one. Everyone around them was also shocked by this statement, which only confirmed and strengthened the rumors about their relationship. Lady Leslie also got into the gossip. They remembered that she was a candidate, and besides, Lady Haley cried because of her. The gossips even mentioned Lady Mandy, since it was previously believed that she had something with Duke Cassio. Deborah overheard these conversations and tears came to her eyes. She thought that the Duke would look at her if she became the goddess of spring, but it turns out that the Duke is not happy with this either. Unable to bear it any longer, Deborah ran away from the spring festival. Her emotional act sparked a new round of gossip. "It's such a pity for Lady Mandy. The whole high society knows that she loves Duke Cassio. Lady Leslie should also know. Did she really get close to him on purpose?" The more Luciana heard such conversations, the more she withdrew into herself, realizing what she had gotten herself into. "Hey, Luciana, come to your senses, you're okay." Her cousin brought her out of her stupor, and he suggested that she leave this place as soon as possible and return home. "Oh, madam, you must be very tired today," Marie greeted her at home. Lying down on the bed, the girl said with a smile that she had been standing all day, and that was why she was tired. The maid suggested that the lady would go straight to bed, to which Luciana asked to leave the lantern, and she would sort it out herself. "Yes, madam, you must be really tired, so have a good rest," Marie agreed, placing the lantern on the table. But as soon as the door closed behind the maid, Luciana immediately jumped up. What other dream? She had more important things to do. As luck would have it, today is the day she receives the materials. What a coincidence. Rich had been tiring her out all day, and now she wouldn't be able to sleep. No, on the contrary, it's good. She needed to stay awake anyway. But what was he thinking about just today? She definitely needs to interrogate him. "Good evening, Duke." Luciana stood in front of him, her arms folded across her chest. Rich greeted her without even looking at the girl. He pointed to the materials she had requested. They were ready to be taken. But the girl had no time for this. They needed to discuss something. "Your action has placed me in a difficult situation which does not bode well for either of us," Lucy said. Rich still couldn't look her in the eye, but he apologized, saying he didn't mean to make her uncomfortable. "It's entirely my fault," Duke Cassio admitted, and Luciana had to accept it. He acted as if he was hypnotized, complained about the results of the festival, stared in front of everyone, and knocked out an annoying nobleman. And even though it was all because of the mark, there was no other choice. "Sir, why did you interfere?" Lucy asked him directly, forcing him to look her straight in the eyes. She was grateful for the help, but they were surrounded by people, and such an act could not help but start gossip. "That aristocrat, I held a grudge against him," Richt answered tensely. His answer surprised the girl. How strong was the insult to resolve it like that? And why did Richt choose a method that was guaranteed to cause rumors about her, when she simply stood aside, and the duel unfolded right in front of her? Having calmed down a little, Lucy noted that she shouldn't have acted like this at the spring festival. "But you were definitely in danger," Richt said indignantly, causing the girl to become perplexed. The bastard latched onto the miss like a leech. "Should I really have remained inactive?" he replied, embarrassed. Richt explained that as soon as he noticed the disrespect with which he was addressing the lady, his body moved on its own. "Why are you worried about Mr. Dimitri's rudeness towards me?" Luciana asked. The Duke swore it was just a coincidence, and even the declaration that the festival was invalid had simply slipped from his lips. Luciana asked him, puzzled, what he had just said, and Richt said that while he was in the crowd, he heard nonsense being said about her. And he got furious. "I didn't need to listen anymore, to be honest. For me, you are the most beautiful girl," Richt suddenly said. The girl listened to him, becoming more and more perplexed. "What's more important is that you're not hurt. He didn't harm you." The man came close to her and covered her face with his hands. When Richt is so gentle, it seems as if he really cares about her. But then Luciana noticed the mark on his wrist and immediately came to her senses. For a moment she lost her head, but quickly realized that it was all about the mark. The girl asked why he was so worried about her, to which Richt responded in surprise that it was obvious. "Do you realize that you are acting like my lover?" Luciana asked bluntly. And Richt suddenly realized that he had done it again, without realizing it. The girl hurried away, determined to break the connection as quickly as possible. "My eldest son doesn't care about marriage. It's a complete headache," the guest complained to the Marquise and Marchioness Leslie. And since the conversation turned to the children's marriage, the owners remembered their eldest son, who also did not listen to his parents on this issue. "At least you don't have to worry about your daughter. What a relief," the guest remarked with a smile. The Marquis and Marchioness did not understand what he was talking about. Of course, the guests enlightened the hosts about the rumor that was circulating about their daughter's affair with Duke Cassio. Our Lucy, wait, with whom the owners opened their mouths in shock. The whole city is talking about nothing else after the spring festival, of course. The gossip is often exaggerated, but still. Many aristocrats claim to have seen Lady Leslie with His Grace the Duke himself. "Dom Cassio, you are very lucky," the guest admired, not noticing the frozen state of the Marquis and Marchioness. When the guests left, the Marquis and his wife began to discuss what they had heard. Marchioness Leslie recalled how Duke Cassio had once visited them. It was surprising, but not intentional. His carriage was only a little delayed. He started the conversation first, and this seemed strange to the woman. He seemed to be intending to summon Luciana and looked very excited. The Marquise told everything to her husband, but she herself was deeply lost in thought. "Sorry, I'm late," Luciana said as she came down to the dining room. Her parents noticed that she looked tired and asked how she was sleeping, to which the girl replied that she had been very busy lately. The Marquise noted with a woman's gaze that her daughter did not look like a person who, when on dates, lovers usually shine. It must be just gossip. But she should still ask to make sure for herself. "Lucy, have we heard that you and Duke Cassio are in love with each other?" asked the Marquise, causing Lucy to choke on her water. Drying herself vigorously, the girl reassured her father, who asked if she was okay. Only 2 days had passed since the gossip had spread so quickly. "Judging by your reaction, you didn't know. Don't worry, it's not worth it," the Marquis said. And the Marquise added that she had been seen with the Duke, which was why they wanted to ask. "It's just baseless gossip, isn't it?" the parents asked hopefully, and the girl froze for a moment. Luciana decided not to lie to her parents, but it took courage. "No, really, I was with Duke Cassio," the girl stunned her parents. And then she explained that it wasn't in that sense they weren't lovers. The Duke simply helped her in a difficult moment. The Marquis and Marchioness were puzzled by what he meant by helped. Lucy really didn't want to explain what happened that day, but it seemed she had no choice. "Mr. Dimitri was stalking me, and at a time when I didn't know what to do," the girl began to tell. The parents, already extremely surprised, listened to the story with their mouths open. "Oh my God, so that's what happened. Why didn't you tell us right away?" the Marquis drawled. Luciana was embarrassed. Everything had been resolved in the end, so she didn't want to bother them without a good reason. The Marquise responded understandingly that this was normal and that they were not scolding her. "It seems the rumors are greatly exaggerated," the woman replied with dignity, privately pondering how to deal with the heir of Dimitri's family for harassing her daughter. They also offered to express their personal gratitude to the Duke, and Lucy had to agree. She cheerfully replied that she would do so, but in her heart she was desperately wondering what to do and how to proceed. Afterwards, the girl went to her office, but she couldn't stop thinking. The rumors even reached the parents. Everything is getting out of control. It's not possible to lie forever. And the Duke's behavior becomes more and more strange. Luciana knows it's because of the mark. Helping is pointless, but she couldn't imagine that he would change so quickly. Moreover, there was an important point that was very disturbing that day. Duke Cassio had to look at Deborah and not at her. Luciana can't afford to fall into a trap. She needs to focus on what she came for. She is an obstacle in their love story. The connection needs to be broken. Then everything falls into place. "I am completing my report. The investigation team will arrive shortly to present their report," Yvonne said. The Duke carefully studied the documents, provided everything was clear to him. Then the squad captain bowed and headed towards the exit. On the way, the girl plunged into thought. The captain was, as usual, cold and abrupt. So why was his behavior different at the Spring Festival? If they said they were different people, she would have believed it. Yvonne thought he'd asked her to partner with him to get closer to the bad guy they were tracking, but the Duke's actions had nothing to do with undercover work. Like a true detective, Yvonne looked for the reason and found it. The captain was constantly next to the pink-haired miss. Besides, last winter the Duke punished those idiots who talked about pink hair. The more the squad captain thought, the more strange things she remembered. The lady's reaction was also strange. She looked much more worried than the situation required. A secret romantic at heart, Yvonne assumed they were actually in a relationship. Meanwhile, Rich was busy with working documents. At least he tried, but all he had in his head was Luciana. He knew it was his own fault, but he didn't do it on purpose. She was so gorgeous that day. But the results of the goddess of spring made him angry at the mere memory. Fools who couldn't tell a real flower from the weeds. He couldn't just ignore them and do nothing. But his reckless words got her into trouble. Should he send people to quiet the rumors? There was a knock, interrupting his thoughts, and Rich remembered that the investigator was supposed to arrive. "Greetings, Your Excellency," said the hooded figure, and the Duke immediately asked for news of the man who had planted the badge. The investigator replied that they had been combing the capital for the past few days, but had not found a single lead. "My sincere apologies," said the investigator, shaking in anticipation of punishment. He had heard that His Excellency was taking the matter very seriously, and he imagined how he would react. But to my surprise, I only heard the answer, "Okay." It was a huge relief to him, but his reaction was calmer than he expected. At this time, the Duke was calmly wondering what kind of magic the unknown people had used to disappear without a trace. If they are so experienced, they may have realized that they are being followed, so should they stop searching? And only after thinking this did Rich realize what exactly he had thought. By doing so, he would never catch them, but nevertheless the thought of canceling came to his mind. So why is he so calm? He can't find a single clue about the bastards who left the mark, but he's not even angry about it. It's as if he has no desire at all to fight the mark on his wrist, no desire to fight. It's so unlike him. It's curious, thinking only about your partner. The truth is that you want to make it last forever. The voice of the dark Richt sounded in his head. The Duke couldn't deny it. He really didn't feel anything. It's almost impossible, but it has to be admitted. "I apologize. If you wait a little, I'll find a lead," the investigator promised. But Duke Cassio firmly answered, no, he would do everything himself. And he ordered Godwin, who was waiting outside the door, to bring the sword and the robe. Investigator Richt ordered him to rest. The man tried to object that the Duke shouldn't go alone, but he didn't even listen to him. Taking the sword and robe from the butler's hands, Richt kept going over everything in his head. Did he really want this to last forever? No, he only forgot himself for a moment. "Thank you for accepting the invitation, Mistress Mandy," said the second princess to Deborah. The girl replied that she should thank Her Highness. "You are quite popular. Don't be shy, after all. You are the star of the Spring Festival," the princess reminded. The mention of the festival offended Deborah, and Her Highness continued to say that the palace never stopped talking about Lady Mandy, and also about the persistent rumor that appeared after the Spring Festival, that Duke Cassio and the Marquis Leslie's daughter are lovers. Deborah winced as if she had been slapped, but she managed to keep her face. It was quite funny since they hardly interacted. The princess continued to enthusiastically discuss the gossip. She thought it was a rather unexpected pairing and hinted that it should have been another lady. "No, what are you saying? It's all just on my side," Deborah immediately replied. And the princess smiled. This girl is too predictable. Whether it was a pity or a stupidity, the princess seemed to know the reason. "So aren't you that lady?" she asked with a smile, finding the situation even more amusing. Like a little trembling rabbit, Deborah could barely answer that it was impossible, and the princess only watched this timid girl with pleasure, wondering how she had even dared to approach the duke. Deciding that she needed to stop teasing her and calm her down, the princess said that perhaps the joke had gone too far. But such rumors do indeed circulate. They are just gossip, smoke without fire, so you shouldn't take everything at face value, and asked Lady Mandy not to worry about it. To which Deborah, with all her sincerity, thanked the princess for her concern. The carriage rolled steadily along the road, carrying Lady Mandy away. Deborah thought, "It seems that Her Highness the Second Princess takes everything as hearsay. Probably she did not personally hear the words of Duke Cassio. This spring festival is unreliable. The tone in which he said it made you think." Besides, Deborah had never seen the Duke's face like that before. They looked like they came from heaven and looked good together. Feeling pain in her chest, the girl realized that she could not stand aside and do nothing. Welcome to Dan Foner's studio. A bell on the door greeted visitors to the store. The Marquis and Marchioness immediately inquired where the men's clothing store was and headed there. Watching her parents chatting sweetly, Luciana whispered to them where the gift accessories were and was sent to the second floor. It was her father's birthday, and Luciana was eagerly choosing what might be a suitable gift for him. She was so engrossed in her choice that she didn't notice another person in the room. "Ms. Leslie," a soft female voice asked, and Luciana immediately recognized Deborah. Lady Mandy smiled at the sight of them meeting again and asked how she was doing. Although Luciana replied that everything was fine, she felt awkward, not believing that they had crossed paths again. Then an awkward silence fell between the girls. The atmosphere was incredibly embarrassing. Luciana hurried to buy a gift and leave, but you can't take something random, although you should choose quickly, which makes it even more difficult. Watching Lady Leslie choose a gift, Deborah couldn't resist. "Mistress Leslie, I know it's rude of me to ask such a thing, but what is your relationship with Duke Cassio?" like she asked, startling Luciana. Lucy's initial surprise was replaced by another feeling. She understood why Deborah was asking such a question. "The rumors are false. We are not lovers. We hardly knew each other before all this," she answered as calmly as possible. She told the truth, but why is my heart beating so much? "To be honest, the gossip confused me as much as it did you, but we don't have a relationship at all," Luciana added to the already surprised Deborah, and answered in such a way that she understood. And she immediately asked for forgiveness, since she decided that Lady Leslie was there for the same reason as she was. "Probably to buy a present for Duke Cassio," Lady Mandy finished sheepishly. Luciana was horrified that she could even think of such a thing. Deborah then explained that what Luciana was pointing to was what she had planned to give to the Duke. The girl immediately raised her hands and turned around, praising the lady's excellent taste as she went, and explaining that she was looking for a gift for her father. And the more Luciana explained that they had a family shopping trip today, and that her mother was also downstairs helping her father choose clothes, the more Deborah realized her mistake. At some point, on impulse, she grabbed Lady Leslie's hands. "Ms. Leslie, I'm very sorry I said too much," Deborah apologized sincerely. Lucy awkwardly replied that everything was fine, and that she could contact her if she had any more questions. And she hurried away. God, what is she even talking about? Looks like she'll have to buy another gift. Deborah watched her go softly, feeling some relief. In fact, she was glad to meet her. Like all the previous evenings, Luciana spent this one in her laboratory working, concentrating on pouring liquid from one test tube to another. And I was very happy to see that the steam was stable and the color of the liquid did not change. The notes said that the finished potion would glow bright orange, and Luciana was glad that she had finally done it. After so many mistakes, she succeeded. You need to collect the finished potion and go to Duke Cassio. However, if the potion works, then the imprint can be removed today. Luciana thought for a moment. But then I was happy. It was wonderful. No rumors, no lies, no worries. No more watching Rich's strange behavior. What a relief! The girl laughed, but fell silent almost immediately. She didn't understand what was wrong with her, because she thought that she would be happier after such news, but she was overcome by an incomprehensible feeling. No, it's just that the sudden change feels strange, and she's sure it will get easier once she gets over it. That's right, it was time to finish everything, and Lucy put the finished potion in her bag. "Hello, Duke," said the girl, finding herself in Rich's bedroom. The Duke noticed the bottle in her bag almost immediately. Yes, the first potion is ready. She took out the bottle with pride and joy. Luciana assumed that he would be happy with this news and would want to finish everything as soon as possible. But Rich, on the contrary, looked very puzzled and confused. She genuinely thought he would be pleased, but his reaction puzzled her. "So, after drinking it, the mark will disappear?" asked the Duke. And Luciana confirmed that it will if it works, but the color is correct, so she hopes it will work. Rich realized that she really wanted this, but the girl was perplexed as to whether he didn't trust her, so she tried to reassure him, saying that this was the result of long-term research. However, she would take it herself, and without wasting any time, Luciana removed the lid, intending to drink the potion. But she couldn't do it because Rich stopped her. "Wait, do you want a drink?" the man asked in horror, covering her mouth with his hand. The girl tried to say something, but only indistinct sounds came through his hand. "I was afraid that you would do this and acted thoughtlessly," Rich recoiled. Feeling awkward, the girl nevertheless said that everything was fine. "In any case, it was prepared especially for me," Luciana said. And in a few big gulps, she drank the whole bottle. Rich watched her actions with sadness. Could this really be the end? Luciana froze, listening to the sensations in her body. She could feel the potion spreading. Judging by the research log, the reaction should be quick. "Are you okay?" Rich said worriedly. The girl wanted to answer yes, but suddenly started coughing, and then she discovered blood on her hands and heard Duke Cassio's worried cry.